Episode 261. Computer Skills Run in the Family. Mr. Anderson's party nodded in agreement. With such groundbreaking music, ordinary people would be itching to shout from the rooftops to make it known. Who would put their feet up and release it a year later? Mr. Anderson obviously thought this way. If this incident were real, it would definitely be a heavy blow to Mr. Grint's credibility and status. He directly dialed Anne's number. This matter had been spreading for several hours, and Anne was still staring at it, panicking. She almost jumped out of her skin when the phone rang, but she still suppressed herself and went to the balcony to answer the phone. "Hello, teacher."
"You know about the thing on Twitter, right? Don't be afraid. Just tell me if you wrote the music composition a year ago. Do you have any evidence?"
Mr. Anderson sounded very calm and steady. He obviously believed her, and his words were like a booster to the otherwise restless Anne. Taking a deep breath, she glanced at the students walking about downstairs and said firmly, "It was me. I still have the manuscript." The manuscript was obviously old. It was the best piece of evidence. At the Grint family's house, Mr. Grint had just returned. Henson had left for Austria recently, so Mr. Grint was still helping him to clear the necessary procedures. He had only returned at home around 9 or 10 o'clock the past 2 days. When he got home, Mr. Grint took off his coat and took the cup of tea from Mr. Sampson.
"How was Brian's progress today?"
he asked.
"Not bad. He's already trying to manage some small businesses."
Mr. Sampson's expression eased significantly at the mention of Brian. Brian had gone through a transformation during the summer vacation and had come back to receive family training in business. He had been in retreat until now and had basically been accompanied by Mr. Sampson only. Because of this, Mr. Sampson hadn't followed Mr. Grint for the past 2 months. Nodding slightly, Mr. Grint sat down at the dining table to eat. At this time, the phone rang with a call from the Evanston Association. Mr. Sampson went to the sofa to pick it up. His smile and eased expression suddenly stiffened. Mr. Grint massaged his temple and reached out for a bowl of soup. As he slowly ate, he noticed that Mr. Sampson's expression wasn't right, so he looked up and narrowed his eyes.
"What's the matter?"
He put down the bowl.
"Mr. Grint, something happened."
Frowning, Mr. Sampson explained the incident on Twitter to Mr. Grint. After listening to him, he threw down the fork with a bang. He asked his men to dig out the post made by Anne's fans and immediately checked the comments. "She's still a senior student of the Evanston Association. My last wish is for her to be removed." "My last wish, too." "Is the Evanston Association crazy? They accept such a person? She's an embarrassment to the violin industry. I feel so sorry for Miss Anne." "Does she think she can fearlessly plagiarize just because she's Mr. Grint's apprentice?"
"I heard that she's at Mr. Grint's apprentice. Mr. Grint, what would you like to say?"
Things had fermented overnight and only gotten worse. Mr. Grint lost his appetite out of anger. How could they think he would not know who the music score belonged to?
"Mr. Grint, should we go to Miss Miller?"
Mr. Sampson whispered.
"She can just publish her manuscript." "How could she have the manuscript?"
Mr. Grint massaged his temples. Bessy hadn't been aware of her manuscript's value. Her shortcoming was her ease of success.
"She threw away almost all of her manuscripts. If it didn't reach perfection, she would just throw it away."
Because she probably never imagined that trash to her was like treasure to others. Mr. Sampson was taken aback. He never expected this and immediately became solemn.
"Her manuscript. Could it have been picked up by Anne?"
The art world demanded evidence. Evidence had to be shown to prove the original composer. First, Bessy had no manuscript. Second, she had no videos. On the other hand, Anne might have the manuscript, and most importantly, the video of her playing it on the violin was still there. That was the most direct evidence. Bessy only had videos these last few days, so it was easy for her to be accused on the internet. Mr. Grint had already known the truth behind Anne's tune last year, but he didn't have any substantial evidence and had only mentioned it. If he had blown things up then, people might have criticized him for putting on a bold face and forcing Anne to admit plagiarism. These days, online public opinion was too pressurizing, and most people subconsciously favored the weak. The situation now was as such. Some netizens had very strange views. One had reason to fight for someone as long as they were weak. Any marketing account could drive public opinion. Mr. Grint didn't dare to underestimate this aspect since it was related to Bessy's future. He walked upstairs and lowered his head to call Michael. As for Bessy, her temper was too violent. Mr. Grint didn't dare mention it to her. He was afraid she would go to Anne directly with a knife. After all, there was the incident that had happened a few years ago, too. Overnight, there was no movement from Mr. Grint and Bessy. Anne got up from her bed, her mind abuzz with thoughts. She understood Bessy very well. If she had not spoken for so long, it indicated that she didn't have any evidence. Her heart pounded vigorously. She had read thousands of Twitter comments comforting her. No one thought she might have copied Bessy. Her fans had increased by 100,000 and were still rising. Would the Evanston Association want someone with a history of plagiarism? Without Bessy, wouldn't she be number one? Opening her Twitter page, she made a post stating that she had composed this piece of music at school a year ago, and that many people could prove this. In the end, she even tagged a few of her classmates. At that time, she had indeed practiced the piece in the art building of Brightbow High School, so several people were aware of it. It was the second day of registration, and there was no need to stay on campus. Anne returned to the Perez family's house especially to dig out the violin composition from her luggage. She took a photo and posted it on Twitter. It took me a month to write this. At the Highline Apartments, Bessy was still in her room. Her curtains were closed and she was sitting in front of the computer, her cold white fingers flying on the keyboard. She typed a string of codes. After a long while, she pressed enter and the code transformed into a rather familiar IP address. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't care about this and just put on her earphones. It's solved. Let Giant Crocodile know, she said to Jared. Jared replied, okay. He hung up and quickly contacted Giant Crocodile. Bessy didn't turn off the computer and just headed downstairs with her teacup. Downstairs, Michael was on the phone with someone in the living room. When he saw her, he immediately hung up. Let's eat. Pointing to the dining table, he sat down opposite, his hand turning his phone absent-mindedly, his expression inexplicably cold. His eyes barely hid his emotions. Bessy took a bite of her food and couldn't help but ask, "Are you begging to ask me something?" "Who's begging?" Michael glanced at her and changed his tune halfway, but his tone still didn't sound pleading. "No, great God, I really have something to ask you. I heard that you have a recording of your old birthdays. Can I take a look?" "Birthday recording?" Bessy picked up her fork thoughtfully. "How did you know?" Lowering his eyes, Michael thought for a long time before looking up and answering unreasonably. "I just know." Bessy was speechless. "Fine. Marvin, where are my things?" She turned to Marvin. When she had come down earlier, Marvin had just come upstairs to take care of her flower. This pot of flowers was exceptionally delicate and required a bunch of nursing tools. Hearing this, he moved the flower pot to the window. "They're all in the library downstairs." Bessy had a box of treasures, messy and full of things. She had brought this box over from Brightbow High School. When Marvin asked her what was inside, she only said there was a treasure. Marvin had kept her treasure and put it in his secret base downstairs. He had observed it carefully, but found nothing in particular. Since she called it her treasure, he didn't dare to handle it carelessly. He had forgotten about it after 2 months in Evanston and only remembered it at this moment. Looking up slightly at her, Michael smiled casually. "Eat first, then go downstairs." A few minutes later, Bessy finished her meal and went down with Marvin. Michael followed her unhurriedly, staying a step behind. Bessy walked down the stairs and turned slightly, her voice clear and cold. "Why do you want to look at this all of a sudden?" "I'm curious." Michael chuckled. He put his hand in his pocket and followed her casually. His head slightly lowered, he leaned closer to her and smiled gently. "I'm curious about how you lived before we met." "Oh." Bessy avoided his gaze calmly and said breezily, "I was just skipping class, fighting and often playing games." "Oh, really?" Michael straightened his back and raised an eyebrow. "Student Bessy seems to have been very impressive in school." They reached downstairs in just 2 minutes. Marvin opened the door with a key. Michael was just a step behind her. His smile quickly faded as he stared at her back. Mr. Grint had informed him about the matter last night. Michael had suddenly remembered the birthday video that Bertha had once told him about. At that time, she had only mentioned bits and pieces of it, mostly about how Bessy's birthday party had been very lively and crowded at the time. Although she had already been ill-tempered, she didn't refuse when they asked her to play the violin. Michael had a good memory and remembered Bertha's words and expressions clearly. Her expression had been slightly strange when she said this. Michael remembered it instantly after Mr. Grint told him about Anne yesterday. Even though he had indeed been curious, he hadn't been willing to make her dig up the past. Only now. He lowered his eyes coldly. Marvin opened the door and Bessy followed behind him, her eyes sweeping across the room. It was filled with Marvin's childhood toys, and she couldn't see her big black box anywhere. She put her hands behind her back and asked, "Where's my box?" Episode 262. Evidence of Plagiarism Goes Live.
"Miss Miller, don't worry,"
Marvin responded immediately. With that, he opened a secret compartment and took out Bessy's large black suitcase from a big, obviously custom-made safe. It was an extremely oversized suitcase, and it was a little heavy for ordinary people. However, Marvin picked it up effortlessly and placed it carefully in front of her. She was speechless. Kneeling down, she unzipped the black suitcase. Michael also squatted down beside her and looked at the box of treasures. Marvin was also curious about her treasures. He raised his hand and asked,
Miss Miller, can I look at your treasures?"
Without looking up, Bessy replied nonchalantly, "It's nothing much. You can look." Michael glanced up at him. Opening the luggage revealed a bunch of random things inside, arranged haphazardly without any order. Bessy dug through it casually. What caught Marvin's eye was a golden gramophone-shaped trophy. Bessy had sent it back to Noah, but he had refused and returned it to her, so she had just put it in the luggage. In the corner was a simple wooden box, with slightly rusty locks on it. There were also some messy books. Unable to find the item she was looking for, she dug into the other side and finally found the gift Scarlett had given her at the apprenticeship banquet. As she took it out, the pink diamond that Daniel had once given her rolled from the videotape to the corner of the suitcase. Marvin was speechless as he watched this scene. Regardless of the other things, just this pink diamond alone was worthy of being put in special protection in a safe. He squatted at the corner of the suitcase farthest away from them and looked from the pink diamond to the other subjects. After all, he had seen a bigger diamond at Daniel's house. Furthermore, Sergeant Wilder and the others brought back a box of diamonds with each business trip. Marvin put his focus on the book next to the pink diamond. Its cover didn't look like a regular book. It seemed like a comic. It hadn't been opened, but it still looked dated. This reminded him of what Samuel said to him back in Chicago about how Bessy had once drawn on a bulletin board at school. That was the first time she had established her tyranny. Michael counted 9 discs from 9 to 14 years old. Except for a year, Bessy glanced at these videos again and didn't feel as emotional as she had looking at them last year. Scarlett's mother liked videotapes. Every year on New Year's Day or on either Bessy's or Scarlett's birthday, she would always make a video recording. As for Brian and Luke, they once asked Charlotte's mother if she had a bias against boys, because she didn't make any video recordings for them. Scarlett's mother had admitted her bias very easily. Bessy tilted her head back and stopped thinking about those things. Putting her things away, she closed the box and asked Marvin to put the box in the safe again. After getting the video, Michael went back to his room to watch it alone. At the same time, at the border, a bearded man stood behind Alexander with his eyebrow raised. He spoke in a muffled voice.
"Alexander, can you do it? It's been almost an hour." "Damn, of course I can."
Alexander hurriedly typed on the keyboard, but there were still 2 obvious letters on the screen. K-O. Blatantly arrogant. Completely provocative.
"Really?"
The bearded man had a pair of very beautiful amber eyes, but they were full of contempt at the moment.
"And then?"
Alexander gritted his teeth and released the keyboard.
"The other party isn't easy to beat,"
he admitted.
"How easy can the person challenging Giant Crocodile be? Forget it. How are you worthy of the Hacker Alliance's top 10?
The bearded man was very perfunctory, as if he was driving a fly away.
Leave quickly, I don't need you. Are you kidding? Alexander couldn't control his temper. Damn, what do you know? This person is almost on the same level as our president. I guess I can only rely on my brother's friend now. The bearded man appeared calm, but he still asked in a distasteful tone. What brother's friend? Will she even care? Why wouldn't she? We're on very good terms. Alexander jumped up and made an international call with his phone. It didn't connect. The bearded man sneered. Alexander paused, gripping the phone tightly in his hands. She must be playing games. Wait a while. He called again. She still didn't pick up. Folding his arms, the bearded man raised an eyebrow and chuckled again. Alexander gritted his teeth. She must be in school. You have to wait a while. Alexander's call finally got through on the third try. He raised an eyebrow triumphantly at the bearded man and spoke in a completely different tone. Miss Miller, help. Bessy had just changed her clothes. She put the phone in her ear. Alexander's voice was quite explosive. She moved her phone away from her ear involuntarily. She turned off the computer and asked casually, What is it? Alexander knew she wasn't very patient, so he looked at the computer and explained it to her concisely. Miss Miller, only you can save me. Hearing this, Bessy's curiosity was piqued. She stayed on the phone and leaned against the computer desk. That person's computer skills can match up to your president's? Of course. Alexander nodded frantically, thinking of how Bessy couldn't see the computer. He repeated himself several more times. As a hacker himself, he was naturally very confident and assured in his own judgment. Bessy was more interested after hearing this. She took out the computer she'd just put away and put it on the table again, then sat down in a chair and said calmly, Pass me the information. She restarted the computer. Alexander was busy logging into his account and sending a bunch of complicated things to her. After receiving the information from him, she opened it and started the command window. Several of Alexander's codes and positions were all complete, and she mainly had to check a few positions and the background information behind them. After entering the address, an area was immediately locked off. This area, wasn't it at the border? It looked a little familiar. Bessy had an exceptional talent in digital coding. Despite the huge database system, she could see similarities at a glance. Her hands paused on the keyboard, but she still continued checking. She quickly finished typing a bunch of codes and glanced at the engine. Then, she reached out with her right index finger and pressed the Enter key. The system data changed, increasing in complexity, and a series of zeros and ones jumped up rapidly, rolling brightly on the screen. The green progress bar page was still 20%. With 3 minutes left, Bessy got up and went to pour herself a glass of water leisurely. Instead of sitting back down on the chair, she leaned against it, drinking slowly while looking at the computer page. 3 minutes later, the complicated code disappeared and the progress bar reached 100%. After several beats, rows of data appeared, covering the black background with white words. However, an IP address in the middle looked very conspicuous. It began with a familiar number, 192. It was a familiar domain name. Bessy coughed and placed the glass of water on the table slowly before restarting the engine. 3 minutes later, it was the same familiar domain name. Looking up slightly, she put her hand on her forehead and was finally convinced. Damn, she said. In Austria, Alexander sat next to the computer with his legs opened wide as he lit the cigarette in his hand arrogantly. Terry, let me tell you, within half an hour, Miss Miller will definitely be able to solve it. Glancing at him, Terry reached out to take the document handed over to him. He took a moment to glance at Alexander. Are you very confident in Miss Miller? Out of the Clark brothers, he was the only one who had never met Bessy. When the four of them were discussing her, he could only secretly read about her through the screen. Although he had just criticized Alexander, Terry knew how strong his hacking skills were. After all, when he hadn't gotten good grades in history in middle school, he had hacked into the teaching system and changed his own grades. As a member of the Hacker Alliance who was even familiar with the president, Alexander's computer technology was naturally not weak. So, Terry had come to find him from 1,000 miles away. Of course, I've already told you, her computer skills are as good as our president's. Alexander puffed out a smoke ring, confident and assertive. He was a no-nonsense person.
Terry also relaxed slightly. Half an hour passed. Despite what Alexander said, Bessy had yet to send news. Terry glanced at him and he coughed awkwardly.
Something must have happened. Let's wait for another 10 minutes.
Nothing happened after 10 minutes. Terry handed the documents to his subordinate, staring at Alexander with his amber eyes. Alexander hadn't expected this. He sat upright immediately, took out his cell phone and dialed an international call to Bessy. When the phone was picked up, Alexander anxiously asked,
Miss Miller, have you found out?
Bessy had already turned off the computer and placed it in her backpack. She said nonchalantly, "No."
Huh?
Stunned, Alexander scratched his head in disbelief.
How could it be? You two have similar skills. How could you not find out?
No. Zipping up her backpack, she interrupted him directly and raised her voice slightly. I said I couldn't find it.
Oh, I see. Then it's okay.
Alexander felt startled and immediately responded,
Please return to your work.
Bessy hung up the phone with a click. She was anxious and impatient. Staring at the words, "This call has ended," Alexander was simply stupefied.
That's impossible. She couldn't find out.
Terry also sat upright, frowning slightly. He bit on his cigarette and thought for a while before asking,
Are you sure she's capable of finding out? Nonsense. She infiltrated the manor system under my nose.
Alexander glanced at him sullenly. He pondered for a while more, then hesitantly said,
Could it be that they're equally skilled?
Terry stood up, still frowning. Things had become very difficult.
Who on earth is Giant Crocodile looking for?
Episode 263, A Birthday Recording. In Evanston, at the Highline Apartments, Patrick came in with a document. When he saw Marvin holding the shovel, he silently averted his eyes.
Where's Michael? Upstairs in the study room.
Marvin didn't look at him. Nodding, Patrick went upstairs with the document to find Michael. Michael's door was unlocked and half open. Faint smoke wafted out, and the closed curtains dimmed the room. Patrick pushed the door open expressionlessly.
What's the matter?
Michael took the remote control and turned off the TV. He walked to the table and snuffed out his cigarette before drawing open the curtains. The room instantly became bright. While talking, he walked to the TV and took out a videotape from the machine. Patrick glanced at it, but couldn't tell what it was. Hearing Michael's question, he frowned.
Take a look.
He had nothing much to say and just turned on his phone to show him a Twitter page. It was Anne's Twitter. It took me a month to write this. The comments below were basically verbally abusing Bessy and comforting Anne. The top comment was from Mr. Anderson, expressing that he wouldn't fear authority and would insist on finding justice for his apprentice. The following comments were all about feeling sorry for and supporting them. Pity our poor Anne, the plagiarizer can die.
Why didn't the Violin Association say anything? It's already on the hot search. Why are they still protecting the so-called new star?
Of course, there were also comments singing a different tune. Actually, after listening to their performances, am I the only one who thinks that the other person's emotional expression is better than Anne's? It's more explosive and fiery, and there's also a sense of inexplicable oppression. People who study music would definitely agree. However, this comment only had 6,000 likes, which was almost negligible compared to Mr. Anderson's 120,000 likes. Furthermore, there were more than 7,000 replies under the comment, all of which were insulting the commenter. I won't listen to it. Beat me to death and I still won't listen to plagiarized music. The plagiarized version is better than Anne's. Are you deaf or blind? Have you asked Miss Anne's 15 million fans? Patrick stared at him in fear and trepidation. He originally thought that Michael would blow his top after reading this, but no. Instead, his expression just hardened, and his aura became a little more oppressive.
Should I ask someone to bribe the bot accounts to unfollow the account's Twitter?
Patrick asked. He was Michael's trusted aide and extremely good at scheming. If this matter was left to him for development, he could naturally turn the market upside down, but it required some time. If there was no real evidence, the popularity would naturally disappear after 2 months.
No need.
Michael picked up the videotape, laptop, and a USB flash drive. He lowered his eyes and said in a cold voice,
Let's go to the Violin Association.
glancing at the videotape in his hand. Patrick picked up the car keys thoughtfully, and they headed to the Violin Association with Michael. At the same time, at the Perez family's house, Grace was still packing her luggage. Since Anne was living on campus, the Smith family had bought a small apartment near the university town so that Grace could take care of her. The Smith family had spent a lot of money because of Anne, but in the process of packing up, Grace occasionally thought of Bessy and James, who had randomly appeared in Evanston. Of course, she would never think that James had come to Evanston to seek shelter with Bessy. She was her biological daughter, nonetheless, so she understood her well. James's attitude towards Bessy had been more or less the same as hers. Even if their relationship had eased, it wouldn't be much better off. Even if he took 10,000 steps back and Bessy forgave him, James wouldn't have the face to stay with her. James wouldn't have come to Evanston to develop either. No one knew better than Grace how weak and incompetent he was. Thinking of this, she frowned slightly, unable to figure this out. She opened the closet and took out her clothes to start folding them. Someone knocked twice on the door, and then Elise came in. She looked around the room and asked, "Miss Smith, have you packed up?" Still unaccustomed to her attitude, Grace paused and replied, "Almost." Elise smiled. She was much more natural than Grace, and she stood in the room, staring at her for a long while before holding out her phone. "Do you know what happened on Twitter?" "What?" Grace had been busy with Anne's school affairs these past 2 days and hadn't had time to care about other things. "Rumors of your 2 daughters' plagiarism." Elise scrutinized her expression and dragged the sentence out. "People are saying that Bessy's original violin piece from a few days ago was a copy of Anne's." Bam! The things in Grace's hands fell to the ground. Noticing her expression, Elise smiled slightly and gracefully said, "I just thought you should know. You should make a phone call to show concern for Anne." Grace nodded absent-mindedly, then walked over to the bed and grabbed her phone stiffly. When she opened Anne's Twitter, the comments below her latest post were all against Bessy and supporting Anne. The insults they left were barely readable. She sat down on the bed blankly, holding her phone in her hand, dumbfounded. Unlike everyone else, Grace knew what Bertha had said about Bessy before and had emphasized her forgotten music compositions. At that time, Grace had realized why Anne's style seemed to have gone through a transformation. Now, the plagiarism issue had arisen again. Looking at the verbal abuse against Bessy on Twitter, Grace hesitated. She knew the truth. As Anne's mother, the person closest to her, she could foresee the kind of blow Anne would suffer if she told the truth, be it on Anne's career or in her education. She sat on the bed thinking it through for a while. Finally, she closed Twitter and called Anne to comfort her. She let the rumors run wild on Twitter. After all, Grace had watched Anne grow up. Between her and Bessy, it wasn't difficult for Grace to pick a side. At the same time, at the Violin Association, Michael entered Mr. Grint's office.
"Michael, sit down first. I'll go to the meeting room."
Mr. Grint was holding his phone and looking quite depressed. Michael nodded, and without saying much, he put the videotape and the computer on the desk.
"Go with Mr. Grint."
He motioned towards Patrick. Patrick nodded. When they left, Michael turned on the computer and copied the video from the videotape. He turned sideways, letting the sunlight shine on him through the window. It reflected against his clear eyes. He had watched all the videos. Each video was a little over an hour, and people talked in it from time to time. He dragged the video time to about half an hour later, where a handsome boy handed a violin to Bessy. Michael glanced at the boy and noticed that Brian called him Luke. Without saying much, he just opened the video editor and cut out the scene of Bessy playing the violin. He had studied photography and video editing before. He naturally never thought of comparing himself with the editing masters and photographers, and had just learned it as a side hobby. But now, it actually came in handy. The edited scene was from 4 years ago when Bessy performed the exact same piece. Lowering his eyes and putting on the headphones, Michael finished cutting the video and then saved it separately in another folder. In the video, Bessy stood in the middle, standing on a stool with one leg in an unruly fashion. Unlike now, her face looked young and inexperienced, and she didn't have long hair. Instead, her short hair reached her ears. and black bangs were swiped across her forehead, exposing her brow bone. She looked unbridled, fresh, and wild. In the meeting room, a group of senior officials from the Violin Association had gathered. Mr. Anderson sat in the head seat and looked out the window.
Mr. Grint hasn't come yet?
The others shook their heads. The issue was still fermenting on Twitter, and some people were already questioning the Evanston Association's fairness. If this matter wasn't handled properly, it would have a great impact on the Violin Association's credibility. Anne had already produced the manuscript, and with the video from a year ago present, it basically confirmed the fact that Bessy had copied her. The Violin Association also needed to move forward. Their reputation couldn't be destroyed. They were calling it a negotiation, but in reality, they wanted to wash clean their relationship with Bessy. However, Mr. Grint was in the middle of this matter, and the Violin Association couldn't do anything to him. Mr. Anderson waited a few more minutes before getting impatient. He stood up and glanced at the directors and teachers.
You've also seen the Twitter posts. If a senior student is involved in plagiarism and is not expelled from the Evanston Association, you're clear on the consequences.
As they exchanged glances, Mr. Grint came in. Patrick followed behind him calmly, but his face was unfamiliar, and none of the Clark family paid attention to the Violin Association, so no one in the conference room recognized him. Naturally, no attention was put on him. All eyes turned to Mr. Grint. Mr. Grint's face was quite heavy, and he had dark eye circles under his eyes from staying up all night.
Wait a bit longer. We are investigating this matter. Is it not clear enough?
Mr. Anderson simply didn't want to listen to him. He stood up with his hands on the table, his eyes flickering.
Mr. Grint, you're protecting your apprentice, but I'm protecting mine too. My apprentice has already shown evidence. You can do the same. Of course, the sooner you send a Twitter apology to my apprentice and also relinquish the Austrian Association placing to her, the sooner I'll let Anne forgive Bessy on this matter and pretend nothing happened.
Mr. Anderson smiled at Mr. Grint politely. Mr. Grint lowered his voice and glanced at the people in the office.
Everyone out.
No one in the office dared to take another look at him. After a moment of hesitation, they left the meeting room one by one. Episode 264. Only Bessy Can Save Me. Patrick walked directly to the conference table and sat down. He didn't leave. When most of the people were gone, Mr. Grint turned around and said coldly,
Mr. Anderson, I said last year that Anne's composition was plagiarized. That's because I heard Bessy's original composition a long time ago. Did Anne produce any other compositions in the year she's been in our Violin Association? I don't believe that you're unclear on her composing talent. Mr. Grint.
Mr. Anderson's eyes narrowed. He picked up the teacup on the conference table and took a sip. When he spoke, his voice was dull and apathetic.
You can put whatever you want in your mouth, but you should be mindful of what comes out of it. I'm sure you understand this point better than me.
Patrick tapped his fingers on the table and finally understood Mr. Anderson's behavior. The truth wasn't at all important to him. Perhaps when Mr. Anderson posted on Twitter, he already knew who the composition belonged to. Because Mr. Anderson could tell they couldn't come up with any evidence, he dared to act recklessly and even wanted to gain complete control of the Violin Association through this incident.
Your actions now are tantamount to ruining Bessy's future, given her aura and talent.
Mr. Grint gripped the table with his hands and stared coldly at him.
I don't care what happens to her. I've already told you, as long as you post an apology on Twitter and give up the student position in the Austria Association, everything can be discussed.
Mr. Anderson drank his tea calmly. Mr. Grint's heart sank further.
If...
Mr. Grint clenched his hands and hit the table. He was about to say something when Patrick stopped him.
Mr. Grint.
Patrick finally got up from the table. Glancing at Mr. Anderson, he reached out to hold Mr. Grint's left arm.
Michael is still waiting for your return.
Mr. Grint glanced at Mr. Anderson, not wanting to leave. Patrick already knew about the birthday recording and said calmly,
Michael is waiting for you.
With great strength, he dragged Mr. Grint away, preventing Mr. Grint from continuing the conversation. When they left, someone from outside the conference room walked over to Mr. Anderson and frowned.
Mr. Grint didn't agree. Does he have evidence in his hands? How could it be? If he did, he would have released it last night. Why would he indulge the online netizens and let them scold his apprentice?
Mr. Anderson sneered. The two had been pitched against each other for so long that he knew his personality inside out. The person beside him felt relieved and then asked,
"What should we do now?" "What should we do?"
Mr. Anderson took out a cigarette and said indifferently,
"Since Rupert Grint refuses to surrender, I'll continue to blow things up."
Inside Mr. Grint's office, Michael had already turned off the computer when Mr. Grint came in. He was putting away the computer, still holding a cigarette in his right hand, while the lighter in his left hand exuded a faint blue flame. He was looking out the window indifferently.
"Michael, just handle this matter the hard way."
Mr. Grint walked in and sat down opposite him. His voice was deep and obviously depressed. Turning around, Michael glanced at Patrick and waved the smoke from the cigarette away. The smoke spread around his jade-white hand.
"What did they say?"
He was referring to Mr. Anderson and the others. Reaching out, Patrick first took out a voice recorder from his pocket and handed it to Michael, then repeated the situation concisely. Michael took the recorder and played with it, chuckling softly. Sitting opposite him, Mr. Grint could clearly see there was no hint of amusement in Michael's eyes, only coldness. At this moment, Mr. Sampson came in from outside, a little panicked.
"Mr. Grint, Mr. Anderson has posted again on Twitter."
Mr. Grint took out his mobile phone and looked down at his Twitter. Mr. Anderson had tagged him, expressing very clearly that he found his association with someone who abused his status as a high-level artist very disdainful. Mr. Grint slammed his phone down. Chuckling, Michael leaned over and picked up Mr. Grint's phone. He scanned Mr. Grint's Twitter and then sent him a video from his own phone. Once the video came through, he typed a message from Mr. Grint's Twitter account and posted it. He returned Mr. Grint's phone. Once the tweet was posted, his phone started buzzing incessantly. Mr. Grint looked at him, astonished. Michael stood up and patted his sleeves, signaling Patrick to get the computer. He turned to Mr. Grint, still biting his cigarette, and said slowly,
"I'm sorry for all the trouble over these past 2 days."
Patrick followed Michael and said a silent prayer for the group of people in the association. Mr. Grint also returned to his senses. This person was Evanston's Michael Clark. Bessy was too impatient, and Mr. Grint himself had always played it straight. Mr. Anderson thought he had taken the reins and was leading them by the nose, but he didn't know that Michael was best at playing with people. None of the 4 major families in Evanston were willing to go against him. After Michael said his piece, he turned to leave the violin association. Patrick put the computer on the passenger seat casually, while Michael sat in the back seat. He put one hand on the door and casually played with the recorder with the other. Suddenly, Michael thought of something. Taking out his phone, he sent a picture to Mr. Grint. Patrick started the car and gradually drove out to the main road. At the same time, his phone started to ring. He glanced at the screen and saw that it was Terry. He turned on his Bluetooth headset and answered the call.
"Michael, Terry and the others are in trouble,"
Patrick said, glancing in the rearview mirror. Michael had just turned on the recording, and Mr. Grint's conversation with Mr. Anderson filled the back seat. Looking rather indifferent, Michael replied in a relaxed tone,
"What is it?"
At the Violin Association, Mr. Grint was still in his office. While Michael was present, he had held himself back from going onto Twitter despite burning with curiosity. However, his phone kept buzzing. The notifications were coming in so quickly that the phone almost couldn't keep up. After Michael left, Mr. Grint quickly glanced at Mr. Sampson.
"Mr. Sampson, close the door."
Mr. Sampson went to close the office door. Sitting on the sofa, Mr. Grint quickly opened his Twitter to take a look. His Twitter was lagging a little, and he couldn't get it to load on the first try. But on the second try, it got better and showed an overwhelming number of likes, comments, and tags. Mr. Grint's Twitter post was very simple. It was nothing but a video. The energy around this matter was intense. Netizens had switched from Anne to Mr. Anderson, jumping on whatever bandwagon they could find. Only Mr. Grint had remained silent, which had made netizens even more certain that he was guilty. After the video was posted, some people didn't even bother watching it and immediately insulted him. You said that Anne plagiarized last time, and so you didn't accept her. But now your own apprentice plagiarized. Aren't you going back on your words?
Please apologize to Anne.
Such posts were liked and extremely popular. But 5 minutes later, a new reply gradually surfaced.
Everyone, wait, I think we're on the wrong side. Everyone, please watch the video first.
This person complimented Bessy and even apologized to Mr. Grint. Soon, several new apology comments were posted. Even the popular commenter that had asked Mr. Grint to apologize to Anne replied under his own comment, abusing Anne and Mr. Anderson. The crowd of onlookers going with the flow were confused and began clicking on the video. The video was only 5 minutes long, and it was evidently from several years ago. The video quality was far from the current high definition, but the person who shot it probably was a professional videographer, as all other aspects were excellent. Last year, after Anne's performance in the exhibition competition, Mr. Anderson had accepted her as an apprentice because of the spirituality in her violin music. Then, her video had quickly become popular on the internet. Since then, she became a professional violin account and had accumulated many fans. Most of her fans had fallen for her due to her first song, but Anne hadn't composed further and had focused on displaying her violin techniques. When caught in the violin plagiarism storm, most people hadn't listened to Bessy's violin music. The small number of people who listened to it and commented that Bessy played better than Anne had been completely refuted. As such, no one dared say anything more about Bessy's violin music. Those who dared to say were accused of covering up for her wrongdoings and defending her. Until today, Bessy's early violin music didn't have much skill, but the first version of her song was full of emotion, like a flame dancing in the dark night, completely different from Anne's light and gentle adaptation. Anne hadn't been able to understand this kind of emotion and couldn't control this style of music. Thus, she had adopted it and blended a few tunes into it, making it a simpler rearrangement. It wasn't obvious if it wasn't directly compared to Bessy's version, but once it was, Anne's completely came up short. Even those who had jumped onto the bandwagon and didn't understand music all had to admit this fact. Most importantly, everyone could see the background in the video. The TV was muted, but it still showed the live broadcast of a sports meet. It was the international games 4 years ago. Plus, teenagers are in a period of continuous growth and change day by day. Even though there wasn't a TV in the background, everyone could see that the 16-year-old Bessy in the video had short hair and a fresher look. Everything could be faked, except time. Anne had said the song took her a month to write, bit by bit, a year ago. Many netizens, staring at their computers and mobile phones, finally understood the truth. Of course, there were also some suspicions. Why did Anne have the manuscript of the music? She had even posted a photo of it. After this question was posted a few times, Mr. Grint's Twitter was updated again.
Manuscript of the sheet music? My apprentice has a lot.
He also posted a picture along with a post showing a pile of crumpled sheet music placed on the ground casually. Unlike the video, this picture was very clear. Even the writings inside could be seen clearly when zoomed in. The handwriting on the manuscript was messy and unruly. It was the exact same handwriting as the one Anne had posted on Twitter before. Unlike her, Mr. Grint's picture showed several manuscripts, while Anne only had one. There was no need for anyone to tie up loose ends after that. The truth was already out. Episode 265. Giant crocodile is indeed looking for someone hard to find. As soon as the video and the picture were posted, the internet blew up. Over the past 2 days, Mr. Anderson had believed that Mr. Grint couldn't produce evidence. Eager for quick success and gains, he had brought an army of netizens and paid for a spot on the hot search to blow this matter up. Now, it was like entering the bee's nest, and the response was earth-shattering. Netizens had scolded Mr. Grint on Twitter day and night, but at this moment, things took a turn, and they all apologized to him. Soon after, they went to comment on Mr. Anderson's Twitter. Mr. Anderson's homepage was still showing the Twitter post he had posted an hour ago, saying that he felt disdainful towards people who plagiarized. He had even pinned this post to the top, showing his firm stance. At that time, the netizens all supported his defending of his apprentice's rights, and had also left encouraging messages praising his spirit. But now, they realized his defense had simply been created out of thin air, making them feel extremely disgusted. Mr. Anderson came out of the conference room and went to teach the students on the second floor. At the end of the class, some people started whispering in low voices and stealing glances at him. Unaware of what had happened, Mr. Anderson shushed them and then frowned. He left without finishing the class. As soon as he went out the door, people who had been on his side rushed up to him.
"What's the matter? Why are you all so anxious?"
Mr. Anderson patted his sleeves.
"It's not good, Mr. Anderson. Look at Twitter."
The other people's faces were pale, and he looked flustered. Mr. Anderson's heart skipped a beat. This matter didn't seem trivial. He opened Twitter immediately. Twitter was lagging and notifications of new messages popped up incessantly. Although Mr. Anderson was a teacher of the Violin Association, he was only well known within the industry and had less than 2 million fans on his Twitter. Although his fans had increased recently because of Anne, he was still rather unknown. He clicked on the comment page, and the latest Twitter comment was no longer supporting him. Instead, it was scolding him as shameful, saying that he was a hypocrite and unworthy of being a teacher. Someone even asked if he was slapping his own face. What was going on? Mr. Anderson was a little panicked right now. He followed what the netizens said and clicked on Mr. Grint's Twitter. The first thing he saw was the picture full of manuscripts, and the second thing he saw was the video from 4 years ago. Mr. Anderson's mind buzzed and his eyes turned dark.
"Mr. Anderson, what should we do now?"
In the past 2 days, people had already taken sides after seeing the situation between Mr. Anderson and Mr. Grint. With such a development now, those people standing on Mr. Anderson's side had already begun regretting picking sides too early. Mr. Anderson's head was empty. Those words, hypocrite and unworthy of being a teacher, spun in his mind. He originally thought these names would be used on Mr. Grint, but he couldn't bear it now that they were being used on him.
"Wait."
Mr. Anderson took the phone and started posting a new tweet in a panic, trying to save himself.
"I wasn't aware that Mr. Grint already knew his apprentice didn't plagiarize. He never told me and just let things develop to such a point. He made me defend my apprentice like a clown. But for my mistake in this matter, I'm very apologetic towards Bessy and Mr. Grint."
By this time, Michael had returned to the Highline Apartments. Instead of going upstairs, he sat on the sofa in the lobby, holding his computer on his lap and resting his legs casually on the coffee table. He had his headphones on and was editing Patrick's recording. Taking out his phone and flipping through Mr. Anderson's Twitter, he smiled. Marvin brought him a cup of water and he couldn't help but tremble at the sight of his smile. Michael drank the water and continued editing the recording. He opened Twitter and clicked on Mr. Anderson's new post. Then he sent the recording link without hesitation. Many people clicked on this link. It was the conversation between Mr. Grint and Mr. Anderson.
"Mr. Anderson, I said last year that Anne's composition was plagiarized. That's because I heard Bessy's original composition a long time ago. Did Anne produce any other compositions in the year she's been in our violin association? I don't believe that you're unclear on her composing talent. You can put whatever you want in your mouth, but you should be mindful of what comes out of it. I'm sure you understand this point better than me. I don't care what happens to her. I've already told you, as long as you post an apology on Twitter and give up the student position in the Austria Association, everything can be discussed." Mr. Anderson's tone was sarcastic and aggressive, completely opposite from what he said on Twitter. Without a doubt, he had always known the truth. Michael had posted the link in a new comment under Mr. Anderson's Twitter post. Soon, numerous people liked and commented on the post, pushing it all the way to the top trending spot. When Mr. Anderson had first posted this tweet, some people had really wondered whether Mr. Grint was using this incident to gain popularity. However, who knew that within a few minutes, a comment with a link to a recording would appear, and the people in the recording would be Mr. Grint and Mr. Anderson.
Soon, under the original post, someone from the Evanston Association broke the news.
Mr. Anderson's original words in the Evanston Association's conference room. If a senior student is involved in plagiarism and is not expelled from the Evanston Association, you're clear of the consequences.
This sentence ignited many netizens' anger. When they took another look at Mr. Anderson's supposedly righteous and honorable Twitter post, all onlookers felt ashamed for him. He was like a contemptible clown.
Mr. Anderson, why did you post on Twitter?
In Mr. Anderson's office, several people on his side sat down blankly. They thought they had stood on the wrong side. In the office, the group of people exchanged glances, breaking out into a cold sweat. Climbing to their positions in the Evanston Association hadn't been easy, but after offending Mr. Grint and participating in the turmoil between Bessy and Anne, they were about to lose their positions. Previously, Mr. Anderson hadn't planned on leaving a way out for Mr. Grint and Bessy, but he didn't expect for this to happen to himself instead. Getting kicked out of the Evanston Association wasn't so bad. The worst-case scenario was they might not be able to carry on in the violin world anymore. At the same time, Anne wasn't doing any better in school. After finding the manuscript and posting the photo, Anne had returned to school while waiting for Mr. Anderson to call with good news. She went to the new school reception and found the school student union president, who had received her yesterday. The two had already exchanged contact information and were talking about joining the association. During this period, she was rather surprised that Mr. Anderson's call never came. She returned to her dormitory and realized that her roommates were looking at her differently. She felt a little surprised. Going into the bathroom, she closed the door just as she happened to receive a call from Grace.
Anne, are you okay?
Grace sounded very flustered. Mom, what happened? Anne sat on the toilet seat and tried to lower her voice. On the other end of the phone, Grace took a deep breath.
Anne, listen to me. I'll talk to your sister about the incident on Twitter. Don't panic. I only have you to count on.
She hung up the phone right after that. Listening to the dial tone on the other end of the phone, Anne quickly opened Twitter in surprise. After posting the manuscript on Twitter, she had gone out to find the seniors from the student union. She was completely unaware that, within an hour, Twitter had already made a shocking reversal. She clicked on the latest Twitter post. The hottest comment had already changed to a new one. Following the keywords posted by the netizens, Anne clicked on it with trembling fingers and saw the video Mr. Grint posted. She saw a picture showing a bunch of manuscripts. Bam! She dropped her phone and sat on the toilet lid dully, repeating only 3 words in her heart. I am a goner. It took me a month to write this. In retrospect, it sounded incredibly foolish. Anne quickly picked up the phone again and tried deleting the Twitter post. However, she couldn't delete it no matter what, as if it was being controlled by someone. At this moment, she felt her whole being collapse. She understood the reason why the group of roommates had looked at her like that just now. Their eyes were plainly disgusted. At the thought of how the netizens were judging her the same way, Anne finally panicked. She began to regret making such a post in the first place, especially since the Smith family would probably see all of this. What would the Perez family do after seeing it? Would she be kicked out of the Violin Association? Flustered, she stared at the bathroom door in a remorseful and dazed manner. Moreover, she began to regret ever falling out with Bessy in the first place. Otherwise, could she have been the same as Henson? Maybe she would have been able to go to Austria. This kind of thing wouldn't have happened at all. Once such thoughts appeared in her mind, she simply couldn't get rid of them. At the Park Place apartments, James answered Grace's call.
Anne is also your daughter. You were so good to her when she was young. How could you not worry about her at all?
Grace knew that she couldn't contact Bessy, but she knew that James still had contact with her.
Do you know how strong the internet's public opinion is? Anne is so eager to be first. What if she becomes depressed because of this?
Grace's words made James worry. As for Anne, to be honest, he had doted on her ever since she was young, and she was his daughter. He couldn't possibly not care about her. but since it involved Bessy, he went to knock anxiously on Tucker's door. Tucker was still playing computer games. He clicked on a string of characters indecipherable to James. James stopped looking at the computer and explained the situation to him. James knew in his heart that if he called Bessy, she might hang up upon hearing the name Anne. After listening to him, Tucker finally turned his gaze away from the display screen. His hand suddenly paused on the keyboard, and his eyes turned dark and cold. "Did you see Twitter?" Episode 266. Michael provides evidence.
What?
James was taken aback and confused. Sneering, Tucker reached out and pressed a few keys. The game page shrank and changed into a Twitter page.
"This matter has already been fermenting since yesterday. Anne didn't reveal the truth and added coals to the fire instead."
While talking, he flipped through the comments and said calmly,
"Go and ask your ex-wife. She's asking you to beg Bessy, but did she help Bessy beg Anne? Did she say that this incident would bring much harm to Anne? By the way, remember to ask her, did she think of how harmful it would be to Bessy if the evidence had never appeared?"
James was stunned by Tucker's words. Because Grace hadn't gone into details, James really wasn't sure that there was so much to the story. Furthermore, he was certain that Grace wouldn't have helped Bessy to beg Anne.
"Tucker,
He didn't dare to look into Tucker's cold and dark eyes.
There's no need to apologize."
Tucker's gaze went back to the game and he lightly said,
"It's not the first time you've been blinded, after all. Remember to tell me in advance next time. I don't wish to cut off all contact with you in the end because of this."
James listened to him and closed the door in shame. He looked down at his phone, which still showed the screen from Grace's anxious call. Back in Chicago, he had blocked her phone number, but after changing her phone number in Evanston, she could reach him again. Blocking her number again, he returned to his room and stared blankly out of the window. At this moment, Bessy still had no idea what had happened on Twitter. She was just talking to Jared.
"Giant Crocodile met with trouble again."
Jared was at 129's headquarters, crossing his legs in an unruly fashion. He had contacted Bessy for Giant Crocodile.
"Could you—"
After coming upstairs with her phone, Bessy narrowed her eyes and suddenly sobered up after hearing this.
"No."
Jared was stunned. "There's no reason. Don't ask me why." Bessy pressed her palm against her forehead, a headache creeping up on her. "Let them fight it out by themselves." Jared hung up the phone and opened the group chat. He sent a message. "At Giant Crocodile. You guys have to fight it out yourselves." Grimace face. But he secretly gloated over the other's misfortune. Giant Crocodile replied quickly, ... Question mark? Bessy went to sit on the sofa after hanging up the phone. When Michael saw her coming over, he retracted his leg, trying not to reveal his foolish, proud look. However, she wasn't even looking at him. He casually put the computer on the table with clear eyes.
"You used to have short hair?"
Bessy leaned on the sofa and opened a game page on her phone. Without looking up, she let out a perfunctory,
"Why did you grow it out?"
"Oh, I forgot to cut it one year, so it grew out on its own." Bessy's fingers hit different spots on the phone without pausing. Marvin immediately said,
"Miss Miller, how could you even forget such a thing?"
But Michael glared at him before he finished his sentence, making him immediately shut up. Michael held his teacup and gently changed the subject.
"You know Luke Song? I'm familiar with his name."
Raising an eyebrow, Bessy replied, "Of course you're familiar with it. He's last year's national top scorer. He's at Northwestern University in the Science and Technology department." Michael took a sip of cold water and indifferently murmured,
"Oh, Patrick."
He looked up at Patrick, who was just walking down the stairs.
"Don't you have something to tell me about Terry?"
"Yes." Patrick immediately followed him to the study room upstairs. The next day was the last day of new student registration. Bessy took her black bag and returned to her dormitory with ease. The other 3 beds in the dormitory had already been arranged when she arrived. Her 2 roommates were chatting when she came in. They immediately stopped talking and turned to stare at her. Presumably taken aback by Bessy's appearance, they didn't return to their senses until after a long time. After a moment of shock, a gentle girl with short hair and glasses stood up and introduced herself. She had a slight accent. Hello, I'm Alyssa Garcia. I'm majoring in computer science in the Science and Technology department. The next roommate who talked was very sweet and rather short. Dark hair fell down her back and her eyes shone brightly. My name is Cara Rivera. I'm also in computer science. The Science and Technology department was one of the 4 signature departments of Northwestern University. It only recruited 200 people every year, so those who could enter were the cream of the crop. And girls were also a minority. There were less than 10 girls every year. This year, there were only 3 of them, and they had been assigned to 1 bedroom. After Cara finished speaking, she pointed to the bed opposite Bessy and smiled. Our other roommate is Denora Sims. She's in the software engineering department, not the computer science department. She just went out to eat with people from the student union. Oh, and she's also a native of Evanston. Bessy took out the earphone that had been in one ear and nodded very politely. My name is Bessy Miller. I'm from the computer science department. I'm from Chicago. She always exuded a wild and unbridled spirit, so unfamiliar people wouldn't dare to speak too loudly in front of her. Cara felt like she warmed up to people rather quickly, but in front of Bessy, she simply couldn't find any conversation topic. Bessy took her pajamas and went to take a shower. When she came out, Denora had also returned. She had brought back dessert for the other 3. She was stunned for a moment when Bessy came out. Although she had already heard from the other roommates that the last roommate was very good-looking, she didn't expect her to look like this. I brought back dessert. Denora had shapely brows, almond eyes, and an oval face. She smiled and placed a delicately packed box on Bessy's table. While drying her hair with one hand, Bessy kicked the chair by the table out and sat down. Thank you. She was rather polite to Denora. Those who weren't well acquainted with her would find this big boss behavior very ostentatious. Aren't you from the arts department? Denora didn't seem to mind and just smiled. Cara ate a piece of dessert and smiled. No, she's in the same major as me. We're both in computer science. Computer science? Denora was taken aback. She was also a student of one of the 4 major departments. She thought that with her good looks, she was surely from the art department. How many points did you score in your final exams? Denora glanced at Bessy. Still drying her hair calmly, Bessy casually replied, An average amount. Oh. Denora nodded and finally stopped talking. Those who said they scored average generally all scored among the top. Cara bit her pastry and gossiped with Bessy. Denora scored 713 points in her final exams without any extra points. Her language score is 3rd in the Evanston final exams. They had all been admitted to the Science and Technology department, so their scores were naturally not low. However, genius is determined by a fine line of difference. The difference was small, between 680 and 713 points, but it was also worlds apart. This year's national paper had been so difficult that those who scored above 700 points were all considered gods. Bessy nodded, looking quite bored. The phone on her table rang before she finished drying her hair. It was Michael. She went to the balcony to answer him.
10 days of training.
Michael said while holding a cigarette.
If you're not used to living in the dormitory, you can come back. I can handle the school side.
Bessy glanced at the bedroom and put her hands on the balcony. It's okay. I can bear with it. Michael paused, then said,
Okay then. Get some sleep.
Bessy returned after 10 minutes of talking on the phone. Your boyfriend? Denora wasn't usually one to eavesdrop, but for some reason, she was particularly interested in Bessy. She noticed how her cold eyebrows seemed to relax after receiving the call. Hearing this, Bessy paused while holding the towel. She glanced at Denora coldly without answering. Cara laughed and curiously asked, Is he from our school? No. Bessy sat back in her chair. She took out her computer from her black backpack and was silent for a while. The computer was a heavy black one without any logo, like a gadget bought from a second-hand market. Then, from the University of Chicago? Denora continued asking. Evanston was relatively famous for these 2 schools. In less than a second, the computer displayed the home page. Bessy pressed her temples and patiently replied, No, he graduated early. Oh, Denora nodded. If he graduated early, how old was he? She glanced at Bessy and lost interest. Alyssa was nibbling on the dessert and reading a heavy book. Kara and Bessy's bed were near each other, so she was sitting just next to her. She leaned over curiously. "Bessy, how come your computer booted up so quickly?" "Because it wasn't shut down." Bessy pressed a few keys and opened her messages. A bunch of notifications surfaced the moment she logged in. "It was just locked," she replied breezily. "Oh," Kara finally understood. "No wonder. Why don't you have anything downloaded on your computer? Do you play games? Have you heard of the poker tournament? Let's play together, I can teach you." As the most active person in the dormitory, she was naturally very sociable. Alyssa was obviously a school nerd and didn't play games, while Denora had been hanging out with the seniors for the past 2 days. Kara only had Bessy to persuade. Bessy received a message from Ava. She had sent her a bunch of happy faces. Bessy replied with a question mark. Hearing Kara, she closed the message box, entered the English class group chat, and shook her head. "I'm not playing it for the time being. We should go to bed. We have to get up early tomorrow." Throughout the whole summer vacation, other than the violin, she had played poker tournament countless times to help her classmates level up. In the group chat, those who had already started school posted photos of themselves getting tanned after training. Kara stopped paying attention to the game and instantly remembered 2 demonic words: military training. It would last for 10 days. Her mentality immediately collapsed. Denora also looked away from Bessy's computer in disinterest. There was nothing downloaded. She even suspected Bessy was a novice who didn't know how to download things. She took her towel and went to take a shower. Episode 267. A Massive Smack in the Face. Although Bessy, Kara, and Alyssa all majored in computer science, they weren't in the same class. Alyssa was in the second class, while Bessy and Kara were in the first class. The 3 of them didn't train together. The sports field had long been divided into departments and classes. After 2 days in school, Kara already knew the people in their class. She quickly found the meeting place and dragged Bessy there. Bessy pressed down the sea blue brim of her hat and followed her lazily, as if still half asleep. The boys in their class had already assembled, while the instructor was still away. They were discussing the new students in the class.
"There are only a total of 3 girls in the computer science department, and we have 2 in our class. Gary, we've struck gold."
A boy excitedly sat on the ground while holding a hat. Another boy sat down and nodded.
"I've seen Kara. She's a cute girl and pretty good looking. I don't know about the other girl. How come I haven't heard of her?"
There were only 3 in total, and 2 were in their class. They were both precious. They were extremely lucky. The boy named Gary nodded perfunctorily and took out his phone. While they were still discussing this, Kara dragged Bessy to the large group. Her face was half hidden by the brim of her hat, but her delicate chin was still visible. She stuck 2 hands in her pocket lazily, looking cold and cool. She stood out in terms of temperament and everything else. The boys suddenly paused.
"What the fuck? She's in our class in the science and technology department, not from the acting department next door?"
After a few seconds of silence, they finally returned to their senses and started discussing her in low voices. They stole glances at her, and those who knew Kara had already gone over to interact. Bessy lowered her cap again, expressionless. Fortunately, within 2 minutes, the instructors arrived. The youngsters' voices abruptly stopped. It was a well-known fact that Northwestern University's training was strict. Everyone lined up quickly, conspicuously placing the 2 girls in the first row. The instructor was a young man. His face was cold and sharp, with prominent features. His gaze was hostile and cold. The class's name list was held in his hands.
"I'm Instructor Clark,"
he said, concisely in a cold voice.
"Instructor Clark,"
the group of boys shouted in full swing.
"Acknowledge it when I call your name."
The instructor nodded and scanned everyone, before calling out the names on the list.
"Gary Evans, here. Kai Larson, here."
The instructor paused when he saw the next name. He glanced at the crowd with a pair of sharp, cold eyes and slowly said,
"Bessy Miller."
Bessy raised her hand lazily. "Here." Lightly glancing at her, the instructor continued calling names. After finishing the roll call, he put away the list.
"These 10 days I'll be training you strictly in accordance with our system. During this period, no preferential treatment will be given. No matter your gender and status, Since you're participating in the training, you'll have to train properly. Now everyone, run 2 laps around the track."
When he said this, he intentionally looked at Bessy. Last night, after finding out that he was bringing in the new students from Northwestern University, Joshua had specifically asked President Flores to place Instructor Clark in the computer science department. He asked him to treat a student named Bessy preferentially and not let the sun get to her. Instructor Clark had returned to America not long ago after receiving special training. His parents had also told him the same thing about Bessy. Before even meeting her, he already had a bad impression of her. Everyone who came to Northwestern University was the same. Why should she be treated specially before she even started classes? Preferential treatment, eh? He liked to treat the people under him specially. The standard circumference for the inner circle of the sports field was generally 400 meters per lap. 2 laps weren't particularly tough for the group of students, but they would indeed suffer a little bit. After he finished speaking, the group of boys in the computer science department who had been planning to ask if the girls could be excused immediately swallowed their words. They knew that this instructor wasn't someone to mess with. Several other classes were also running on the track. The computer science class originally gathered together, but the gap got bigger and bigger the further they ran. Bessy kept pace with Kara, who was confidently running fast in the beginning and was even chatting with her. "The most handsome guy is our temporary class representative, Gary. The assistant teacher told us in the class group yesterday. Oh yeah, you haven't joined the group yet, right?" Kara was slightly winded at that moment. "The guy beside him is Kai." Beside her, Bessy said very calmly, "You should stop talking." Kara was now struggling to speak. She immediately shut up and started gasping for breath. Her pace also began to slow down. Obviously, she didn't exercise frequently. She couldn't keep up with the fast pace for 2 laps, and at the end of the run, her face was pale and she was almost walking. Bessy basically matched her pace throughout. The 2 lagged behind everyone else in the class, though a few other guys' paces weren't much faster than theirs. Most people lagged behind as they ran. The instructor stood in the sports field watching them. He looked slightly away when he noticed Bessy and Kara falling behind. It was just ordinary training for college students and wasn't comparable to special training, so the instructor didn't really pay much attention to how many minutes they took to run 2 laps. However, the physical fitness of those lagging behind was too poor. "Why don't you look tired at all?" Kara sat on the training spot of the class and gradually caught her breath. "Thank you for staying with me." Bessy sat down next to her, neither flushed nor breathless. "I used to take morning runs." Kara accepted this explanation. No wonder. Not far away, Kai picked up 2 bottles of water. He handed them to the 2 girls. Recovering a bit of strength, Kara unscrewed the bottle cap and gulped down the water. "Thank you." "It's nothing much." Kai knelt down and took off his camouflage cap. Smiling at Bessy, he introduced himself. "I'm Kai Larson, a local." Bessy. With the sun shining overhead and shouting voices filling her ear, Bessy was feeling a little impatient. However, she still took out her thin black phone from her pocket and exchanged numbers with him. Before, her hands had been stuck in her pockets. But now that she had taken out her phone, her hands appeared even more slender and white. Her bony fingers reflected a cold light under the sun. Kai didn't disturb them further after getting her contact information. He added Bessy into the class group and officially introduced her to the class by tagging her. In an instant, more than a dozen people became friends with her. "She's so indifferent, it's a completely different style from Kara," someone murmured. Kai walked over to Gary and lowered his voice. "Her name is Bessy Miller. Strangely, I feel so familiar with this name." Everyone had paid attention to her name when the instructor called the rolls. Only now did Kai figure it out. "Familiar?" Gary glanced at Bessy thoughtfully. "How could you not be? She's the national final exam's top scorer. Have you forgotten?" The enchanting score of 747 points had set off a huge storm on the internet. Most people still couldn't find information on Bessy, so 2 months later, many of the final exam candidates had forgotten the name of the top scorer. They only remembered her as the evildoer who had scored 747 points. At this moment, after hearing Gary's reminder, Kai suddenly remembered this evildoer he had discussed heatedly with his classmates before. "What the fuck? It's her?" Northwestern University wasn't only attended by geniuses. Kai was a local and his score was lower than that of the people from other cities. He had been admitted into Northwestern University with 603 points. Of course, he himself knew that his score was at the bottom of the computer science department. He had been hung up on the 747 points for a few days. Who knew that this person would end up in the same class as him? After the 5-minute rest period, the instructor blew a short blast on his whistle. He stood straight as a ramrod in front of them, wearing a sea blue camouflage jacket. He had taken off his hat, exposing his buzz cut. A buzz cut tested one's facial features, but obviously the instructor's features were outstanding. If placed in the English department or the political science and law department with mostly girls, he would definitely be very popular. Though as one of the 3 girls in the computer science department, Bessy had seen countless people better looking than him. As for Kara, she had a bunch of boyfriends and husbands from among her idols. Her phone screensaver changed every week. Currently, it was a picture of Zeke Miller, the beauty of the entertainment industry. She lowered her voice and whispered to Bessy, "Our instructor is so handsome. Have you noticed?" "Yeah, he's not bad." Bessy lowered her head and stood upright, replying indifferently to her. Kara glanced at her and finally sighed. "Can't you see that the girls in the other department are simply dying to stick to our instructor? Forget it. Since you're so good-looking, everything you say is right." Although Instructor Clark was a real-life idol, Bessy was too cold and didn't gossip with her, so Kara held it back and waited to discuss it with the others in the dormitory. Their entire day of training was basically standing at attention and practicing the goose steps. Instructor Clark's shouts could be heard from far away. "The second girl in the first row, have you eaten? The second girl in the first row, stand straight. The second girl in the first row, step forward. The second girl in the first row." Bessy had never received such orthodox training before. She only knew how to fight, the kind for life and death. But to make her stand in place and repeat the same thing over and over again, this would have never happened in the past. Episode 268. Anne will be unable to carry on. There had been such training in the first year of high school as well, but at that time, Fairfield's management had been lax and loose, and the instructors very casual too. Thus, Bessy had skipped class for a week before signing up. But now, although impatient, her actions were exemplary. She could tell the instructor seemed to be targeting her, and he seemed especially dissatisfied with her. How could she miss it when she was the second girl in the first row? Kara was the first in the first row. After one day of training, everyone in their class noticed this. A group of boys gathered around her to ask if she was okay, and some people even advised her to take leave from the assistant teacher. At 9 o'clock in the evening, at the end of the day's military training, Kara sat on her computer chair and glanced at Bessy. "Did you offend Instructor Clark?" Alyssa had just come back and was pouring herself a glass of water when she heard this. "Maybe he wants to attract your attention," she suddenly asked. Kara sat upright. "Yes, that's right. It's possible." While they were talking, Denora entered the dormitory. Instead of wearing a camouflage jacket, she was wearing a casual dress and holding a designer bag in her hand. Her long hair draped behind her head, and she even had on delicate makeup. Glancing at the 3 of them, she put her bag on the desk and asked, "You guys are back from the military training?" As she entered, a faint perfume fragrance spread through the room. She obviously hadn't attended military training. Taken aback, Kara replied, "We just came back. Didn't you go to military training?" They had gone out together in camouflage jackets in the morning. "It was too sunny, so I called my grandfather." Denora smiled faintly, as if nonchalant. She reached out to open the closet and took her clothes and a towel. "My grandpa talked to my department, so I don't have to continue with the military training anymore." After speaking, she took her clothes and went to take a shower in the bathroom. After she left, Kara and the others returned to their senses. She whispered, "Wow, there's stuff like this happening behind the scenes. Denora's family background isn't simple. She's probably from a powerful family in Evanston. When I came, a senior also told me not to mess with people with these last names." "I'm taking a call." Bessy stopped listening and calmly walked over to the balcony to answer her phone. At the Highline Apartments apartment, Joshua was sitting on the sofa.
It's so sunny today. I wonder if Bessy is used to the training. I asked Instructor Clark to take special care of her.
Having said this, he turned to Michael and distastefully said,
Why did you let her go for military training? What if she injures herself?
Marvin was speechless as he handed him a glass of water. Michael casually picked up his phone and clicked on it absent-mindedly.
She's very used to it,
he sneered.
I'm going upstairs.
He took his phone and directly left without saying anything more. Joshua looked away and glanced at Marvin.
What are you looking at?
Marvin didn't know how to respond. The Highline Apartments weren't far from Northwestern University. It was only a 10-minute drive away. There weren't many people out at this time. In the female dormitory, after coming out of the shower, Denora heard someone knocking on the door. It was a senior girl in a t-shirt. Leah? Denora seemed to know this person and immediately greeted her rather respectfully. You're here to... Leah didn't recognize her and just nodded at her. She glanced past everyone else and finally settled on Bessy, who had just entered from the corridor. Bessy, right? Someone is looking for you downstairs. Bessy had just come back from the balcony with her phone. Thank you, she replied, taken aback. Leah stared at her with a serious expression, but her tone was polite. It's okay. I'm Leah Wilson from the medicine department. I'm in bedroom 102. You can call me if you need anything in the future. Medicine department? Bessy remembered that Michael, Samuel, and the others had all been from there. By the way, if you want to enter the student union, remember to come over. Leah waved to Bessy as they parted ways in the hallway. Loosening the buttons of the camouflage jacket, Bessy smiled and thanked her. Leah sighed regretfully as she stared at Bessy walking away. She could tell that Bessy had no intention of entering the student union. The 4 major families. Bessy went downstairs, guessing that it was probably Mary, Paul, or Luke looking for her. When she got there, however, she saw a figure standing by the tree outside. His head was hanging down slightly, and he had a lit cigarette between his fingers. Standing in the shadow, his facial features were slightly obscured. His black shirt and cuffs had been neatly rolled several times. Even if his face couldn't be seen clearly, his aura oozed from his elongated shadow. At almost 10 o'clock, the gate to the girls' dormitory was still open. Several students passing by couldn't help but steal glances at him. Why are you here? Smiling, Bessy put her hands in her pockets. She loosened up and walked lazily to the opposite side of the tree.
I just came to walk around.
Michael pinched the cigarette butt and threw it into a trash can. He looked down at her.
You seem quite happy.
Her days seemed quite comfortable. Kind of. Bessy glanced around and didn't see his car. You walked here?
The car's on the road. How is the military training?
Michael looked down at her and spoke in a light tone, his emotions unclear.
My dad already spoke to Instructor Clark.
Hearing this, Bessy realized why Instructor Clark particularly disliked her. Crossing her arms, she said calmly, Yeah, he treats me especially well.
That's good.
Michael saw that she seemed quite happy and finally chuckled.
There'll be field training in a while. That place.
What about it? Bessy's interest was piqued.
You'll definitely like it.
Talking of this, Michael's eyebrows drooped, but he seemed rather unhappy.
It's a little far,
he absent-mindedly said. After talking for a while more, he let her head back inside.
Go back. You still have to get up early tomorrow.
Bessy originally wanted to see where his car was, but after he insisted, she turned and went back to her bedroom. But she only took 2 steps when he clutched her wrist and grabbed her. Before she could even turn around, her waist was encircled by one hand. Michael rested his chin on her shoulders, his clear scent close to her nose. The impatience and dispiritedness accumulated in her over the past 2 days vanished without a trace.
Is the dormitory really that good?
He asked lazily, holding her hand. Bessy looked down. To be honest, it's not particularly good, but I can tolerate it. Michael chuckled in a low voice. Under the light, his eyes shone brightly, and all the small glints in them were like tiny smiles.
I knew it.
As soon as Bessy and Leah left the dormitory room, Alyssa went to take a shower. Sitting in her chair and turning on the computer, Kara casually asked Denora, You know Leah? Yeah. Denora grabbed a towel to dry her hair. She sat back down on her chair and frowned. She's the president of the school's student union. She knew her but wasn't well acquainted with her. Kara had a wide social network and got along well with almost everyone. Naturally, she had heard from the seniors of the computer science department that it was best to enter the student union if possible. Putting her chin in her hand, she smiled excitedly. Leah seemed very kind to Bessy. I'll ask Bessy if she can bring me along into the student union later. Denora slowly dried her hair. She glanced at the balcony. Their room was in the third building in the second row. They could only see the building in front of them and not the situation outside the gate. 20 minutes later, Alyssa came out of the shower and Bessy also returned. Kara was about to take a bath when she saw her. She came over with her towel, extremely gossipy. "Who did you meet?" Bessy held her phone lightly in her hand as if she was sending a message to someone. Hearing this, she only vaguely replied without looking up. "Oh, just a friend." Even though they just met, Kara was still bold enough to ask if it was a guy or a girl. When Bessy didn't answer, she asked if Bessy had Leah's contact information. But when she learned that Bessy hadn't asked for it, she almost collapsed. Denora sat in her chair silently, but she internally let out a sigh of relief. "You didn't ask for it? You actually didn't?" Kara grasped Bessy's arm with both hands, shaking it. "She's the head of the student union." Bessy looked up and put away her phone. "What's wrong?" Kara abruptly stopped talking. She sheepishly took her towel to the bathroom. "Nothing. You can do anything you like." Bessy was the last to take a shower. When she entered, Kara turned her chair, dried her hair, and told Alyssa, reading a book opposite her, that she wanted to shake Bessy to her senses. Before long, someone knocked on the door. Kara was closest to the door. She went to open it with her towel over her shoulders. Another senior with very delicate makeup stood outside. She nodded towards Kara, looking both generous and temperamental. "Hello, is Bessy in your room?" "Yes, please come in, she's taking a bath." Kara immediately made way for her and handed her a bottle of yogurt. The senior was holding a pen and a piece of paper. "Thanks." She was a senior after all. She was quite aloof and didn't talk much. Denora also stole more glances at the senior in surprise. Why were so many seniors looking for Bessy tonight? She wasn't even a local. Kara didn't dare to speak much with the senior, who exuded a strong aura. Then the bathroom door opened with a screech. Bessy was tying the belt of her pajamas with one hand. The collar was a little big, and when she lowered her head, a little crimson tattoo could be seen, standing out against her collarbone. Episode 269. Bessy meets her roommates and begins school. Bessy! Having seen her picture before, the senior recognized her at a glance. She looked even better in real life. The senior stood up immediately and threw her aloofness away. "I'm the head of the External Relations Department of the Computer Science Department's Student Union. I wanted to ask you if you have any intention of joining. Of course, our president said that it's okay if you don't want to join this department. How about the office or media department? You can join whichever department you want." There was a difference between the school's student union and the department's student union. Each year during military training, the school committee would begin digging for new students. Of course, Bessy was undoubtedly the best among this group of new students. On the first day of military training, the committee had found her admission information, but unfortunately, not her contact information. Afraid that she would be snatched by other departments, this senior had come right after finding out which room she was in to snatch her up. The more outstanding the student, the better the student union's development. The new students were unaware, but the people of the student union were well informed. They knew what a score of 747 meant. Just look at how the top scorer they recruited last year was at the height of his power now. Fastening the belt of her pajamas, Bessy raised an eyebrow and expressionlessly rejected her. "Sorry, but I don't want—" "No! Think it through." The senior took out the form and put it on Bessy's table. She softened her voice again. "I've already brought the membership form. Should I help you fill it out?" Pulling out a chair and sitting down, Bessy casually propped her legs up and slowly started drying her wet hair. She turned and smiled at the senior. "You can ask the dean of our department. If he agrees, I'll agree to join." The senior felt a little heartbroken. She hadn't imagined that this year's top scorer would be so difficult to reel in. She regretfully put the paper away, but she still forcibly exchanged contact information with Bessy. She told her once again to find her if she changed her mind in the future. Bessy sent her out of the bedroom door. As soon as she turned around, she saw Kara and the others' bewildered expressions. "Bessy!" Kara could hear her voice come out an octave higher. "That senior was looking for you just now." The new students probably all knew the benefits of joining the student union. Some students with many sources of information already knew that many families could be joined after graduation. However, the student union wasn't so easy to enter. There were written examinations, interviews, and even training. Everyone was on par at Northwestern University, and countless people vied for a spot in the student union every year. However, the total number of new entries was just over 100. For the God-favored sons of Northwestern University, it was even more difficult than the final exams. Even Denora had to find a senior to obtain the internal interview materials of the student union, which was already considered rare. But what did that senior just say? She could enter whichever she wanted? She could even help her fill it in? Wasn't this preferential treatment? "They wanted me to join the student union, I guess." Bessy casually threw the towel onto the table and then picked up her phone and earphones. Her voice was steady and neither hasty nor slow. Almost all the college beds were bunk beds. She climbed onto her bed, then thought of something. Poking her head out, she glanced at Kara and distastefully said, "Don't join the student union. It's too troublesome." This sentiment had been relayed by Luke when she came to school. He had instructed her very solemnly. He had even taught her a trick to use the dean as a shield in case of trouble. She finished speaking and laid back down. Kara and Alyssa exchanged glances. They were speechless. Was it legal to kill a roommate? Opposite, Denora remained stiff and silent. Who on earth was this Bessy? Miller. Could she be from the Miller family? But the Miller family had long since fallen. There were almost no women in this generation either. Denora let her imagination run wild. Perhaps because she had been outstanding since she was young, she didn't compare herself to the new students at all. She stood there for a while before taking her phone and heading to the end of the corridor. She dialed a phone number. It connected after a few minutes. On the other end, a girl lazily said, "It's so late already. What's the matter?" "Cousin Sherry," Denora said. She looked down through the window at the end of the hall. "Is there someone called Bessy in the Miller family?" "Bessy? I've never heard of her." Sherry went downstairs and poured herself a glass of water. Her tone was light and her gaze was uninterested. "But the Miller family just took 2 people back. One is stupid while the other is too young." At the word Miller, Sherry was put in a bad mood. She couldn't help thinking about the Miss Miller that the Clark family spoke highly of. With so much information in 129, she hadn't been able to find a single piece of information on this mysterious Miss Miller. Obviously, she was well protected by Michael. The insiders, such as Sebastian, didn't even mention a single word either. Her fingers paled while clutching the glass of water. Denora knew her cousin was in 129 and had a lot of information in her reach. Since Bessy wasn't from the Miller family, she heaved a sigh of relief. Sherry was deep in thought. After drinking the glass of water, she returned to her room. "The World Poker Tour has just entered Evanston and the IT department is short of people," she told Denora. "They'll definitely recruit people in the talent market. Northwestern University has many opportunities." "I understand, cousin," Denora responded. At the same time, Instructor Clark received a call from his parents when he returned to his dormitory. They asked if he had helped Joshua take care of the girl.
"Since you guys are the ones who agreed to it, you can take care of her yourselves."
He reached up to unbutton his coat and sneered.
"Otherwise, don't let her come for military training. She won't receive any privileges from me."
"No." His parents sounded anxious.
"You've been training outside the US, so you don't know that she's Michael's little girlfriend. Don't mess around. If something goes wrong, be careful that Michael doesn't skin you alive. If that happens, you won't even reach the main hall seat of the Clark family branch." "Michael?" Instructor Clark's expression changed. "Where did he find such a person? Back in her day, even Sherry participated in the special training all the way. Forget it. If I don't see it, it can't hurt me."
For the next 5 days, Bessy could understand why the instructor was dissatisfied with her. However, as a difficult person to deal with, she had always been unruly and almost never bowed her head to others. Instructor Clark wasn't one to let things slide, and had dealt with many such subordinates. The Clark family had always cultivated power, and everyone had been sent for special training, regardless of their gender. The youngest couldn't avoid it, even as Joshua's favorite. The Clark family were all strong, which was one of the reasons why no other families dared to provoke them. This was the first time they requested the instructor go easy on someone during special training. He didn't know what Bessy had to do with them, but he was indeed unhappy and dissatisfied. But since his parents had explained the reason to him, he didn't even glance at her throughout the next training sessions. They got along harmoniously. On the 6th day, all new students met and set off to the training base. Both Northwestern University and the University of Chicago trained at the same time every year, and both cooperated with the Clark family. The Clark family would open a training base for 10 days each summer, with space distributed equally among the two schools. The training was an extremely rare experience for all new students and could broaden their views. This was also the first new student resource President Flores received from Joshua as the president of Northwestern University. The training base was located on the outskirts of Evanston, covering an area of 192 acres. The edges of the wall could hardly be seen at a glance. Above the gate, the word Clark was written ostentatiously and domineeringly. Bessy was sitting on the bus in a row with Kara, who looked out the window and said excitedly, "I heard that today's the shooting course. I'm so excited." They had moved to the training base because the extreme training of shooting and rock climbing in the next courses weren't suitable for the campus setting. Everyone in the class was intensely discussing this issue. Bessy still carried only her black backpack. She held it casually on her lap. She had in her black earphones, and her eyes were nonchalantly half-closed. Oh. The bus quickly stopped at a huge field. When the students from the computer science department got down, they immediately felt the surge of heat. They had set off at 6 a.m. and arrived at 9 a.m. Unlike the cloudy weather of the previous days, the sun was shining brightly today. It was stuffy and hot. They were drenched in sweat the moment they got out of the bus. Kara's complexion changed a little, and a cold sweat broke on her forehead. Alyssa put her bag aside at the other bus and walked over. She scanned Kara and noticed something strange. "Your period?" It came in advance. She had always suffered from bad cramps and was pale at the moment. This time, it had come in a torrential rush, 5 days ahead of schedule. "It's okay, it's just shooting class today." Bessy glanced at her. She pressed her hat down and got on the bus again. She came back out with her black backpack. Casually sitting on the ground, she poured out the contents. There was a bottle of sunscreen that Michael had prepared for her, a thick black cell phone, a white bottle of medicine, a few sheets of paper, a few lollipops. The contents seemed random. Kara squatted down to make herself feel better and noted that these things looked strange, like a pile of garbage. "Bessy, have you lost something?" she asked. Episode 270. She's the top scorer. No, Bessy couldn't find what she needed. She put her things back and zipped her bag up. Throwing the backpack onto the bus, she glanced sideways at Kara. After thinking about it, she pushed her cap down and lowered her head to send a message on her phone. "Forget it. Let's fall in first." Instructor Clark got out of the trainer's car and found Bessy's team. He stood stiffly next to a wooden table and glanced at everyone. A dozen safety compressed air guns were placed on the table.
"Everyone should have heard of the schedule for the next 5 days. Today, it's the shooting course,"
he said. His expression was cold and stern.
"Warm up first. Everyone, turn right. Start running.
Report!" In the neatly arranged team, a clear and cold voice sounded. Immediately, a thin and tall figure fell out of formation.
"What's the matter?"
Instructor Clark's face turned black at the sight of her. "Headache. I want Kara to come with me to the doctor." Bessy stood in a very standard military position and said confidently. She was brash and unbridled. The boys in the class were stupefied. What the fuck? Beauties were so unique nowadays? But, with such a full-blown voice, did she really have a headache? Instructor Clark stared at Bessy's face, and his eyes gradually sank. He smiled, but there was a chill in his eyes.
"How long?"
Without even thinking, Bessy said, "1 day." The instructor's face got darker. Nodding, he said coldly without even negotiating with her.
Today's course is shooting. As long as you can reach the passing grade, I'll let you go.
After that, he threw the airgun in his hand at Bessy's feet and stared at her sternly.
There are 10 shots of compressed air inside, and the target is opposite. It's considered a pass as long as you hit the inner circle with at least 2 shots.
Bessy bent down to pick up the airgun, slightly taken aback. Behind her, Kara immediately grabbed her and stuttered. Bessy, I know you're doing it for me, but don't go against the instructor. The school says that you can't mess with people with the last name Clark. I can explain.
Oh, I'm not worried about that.
Bessy stood upright and stuck her hand in her pocket.
I thought he was going to make things difficult for me,
she replied strangely. Kara was confused. She thought she heard Bessy wrong. The target was so far. Wasn't this making things difficult for her? The group of boys also exchanged glances. Gary and Kai obviously knew something was up. Kai whispered,
The instructor is crazy. The passing line is obviously 5 shots anywhere in the circle out of 10 rounds. But to hit the inner ring, it's a distance of 50 meters. How much training would it take?
It was the Clark family's training base, and the family was notoriously strict in Evanston. So Gary looked ahead and didn't reply. Kai asked,
Do you think she can do it?
Gary stared at Bessy without looking away.
I don't know, but she seems very confident. She's the queen of the new students. How could she not be?
Kai muttered. The students of the student union had even rushed to her dormitory a few days ago to try to recruit her, but Instructor Clark was still imposing. No one other than Kai and Gary dared to speak. They watched as Bessy walked towards Instructor Clark step by step. Seeing her approach him, Instructor Clark picked up another airgun and disassembled it. He introduced the structure to her and added,
The recoil is considered big for girls. Be careful.
Although he didn't like her since she was too weak, he still paid attention and gave detailed instructions. Bessy was playing with the airgun in her hand, listening indifferently, clearly impatient. Instructor Clark talked nicely until he saw this. He reached out involuntarily and rubbed his eyebrows. Joshua had really caused him big-time trouble. Weighing the airgun in her hand, she indifferently glanced at him. Can I start?
Yes, you can start.
Instructor Clark took a step back and gave her space.
Students, take 10 steps back.
He was afraid that she would accidentally hurt other students. After speaking, he glanced at her, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly. At a distance of 150 feet, it was considered difficult for the Clark family members to hit the inner ring, much less for a student. Many people couldn't hit the inner ring for even 1 shot out of 10. A student was considered talented if he could hit the target and not make a fool of himself. Who told her to underestimate this training? Who told her to be disobedient? As he thought about this lightly, Bessy had already raised her hand. Because the brim of her camouflage cap was so low, she took off the cap with one hand, holding the airgun in the other. Her raised arm was straight and stable, without a hint of a tremor to the naked eye. But her expression was just as indifferent as always, looking a little lazy with her chin slightly raised. Her posture was pretty exemplary. Instructor Clark was stunned. He was thinking of this when Bessy aimed in one direction. Without even blinking, she pulled the trigger. Boom, boom, boom. 10 shots continuously sounded within about 5 seconds, passing in the blink of an eye. During this period, Bessy's arm remained motionless. She lowered her hand and didn't even bother looking at the target. Blowing the muzzle, she threw the airgun onto the table and glanced at the instructor. Instructor, can I leave now? Instructor Clark didn't speak and just stared intently at the target. Bessy didn't care about him and just put on her camouflage cap again. She glanced at Kara. Come on. Hearing her voice, Kara turned around from the direction of the target and let out a bewildered, "Oh." Bessy lifted her chin, motioned for her to follow, put her hands in her pockets and walked out. Kara stiffly followed her. She seemed to have forgotten her tummy ache. When the two left, Instructor Clark and the other people in the class finally returned to their senses. Kai had good eyesight and could see the only bullet hole in the target. He gasped and stuttered.
Gary, did you see that?
Gary nodded.
Yeah.
Pursing his lips, Instructor Clark took big strides towards the target. There was only one bullet hole in the target. Because the air column constantly shuttled to drive the airflow, the penetrating power was great and the bullet holes looked bigger than normal. All 10 shots had hit the red circle on the inner ring. Instructor Clark's eyes tensed. There were indeed a few people who could achieve this, but what made him feel even more bewildered was Bessy had fired her 10 continuous shots. 10 shots in 5 seconds. How fast was she? With such a great recoil, how could she maintain the stability of her arms? It had been like a drop of water falling into the sea without any hint of undulation. Instructor Clark found it unbelievable. Even he would be a little affected by the recoil. After firing a shot, he would have to pause for at least 1 or 2 seconds. He stared at Bessy and Kara's backs. Bessy walked slowly, but she didn't look like she had a headache at all. As for Kara, she followed behind Bessy slowly, holding her belly with one hand. Instructor Clark had an inkling that instead of Bessy having a headache, someone else was feeling unwell.
"There's a hospital in the base. Go straight and turn left before asking someone,"
he called after them. Bessy lazily waved behind her back, expressing her understanding without even looking back. When he turned around, the other students were still staring at her. He narrowed his eyes and sharply said,
"What are you looking at? Do you want to ask for leave too?" "No, instructor,"
the boys in the class shouted. They were too heartbroken to cry. They couldn't afford to take such a leave. Instructor Clark nodded.
"Turn right. Start running."
After a while, Bessy had arrived at the base's lounge. Not the hospital. 2 teams of people wearing black clothes guarded the lounge's entrance. Kara tugged on Bessy's sleeves and weakly said, "Bessy, the instructor told us to go to the hospital over there. Let's not go in here. The class monitor said we shouldn't walk around randomly." She mainly found the 2 teams of men in black scary. Bessy glanced at the door and said casually, "It's okay, come with me." She walked in through the gate, and the people in black guarding both sides of the door stayed motionless. Kara's palpitating heart calmed down, and she thought involuntarily, had the class monitor lied to her? The lounge looked like a small courtyard house, and the door in the middle of the room was opened. Captain Baldwin came out, and his eyes lit up.
"Miss Miller!"
He might have been exposed to the sun too much recently, for he had gotten tanned. His whole person had undergone many changes. He wasn't as agitated as before, but when he saw Bessy, his excitement obviously rose. Bessy nodded at him and led Kara inside. "You've been here since your arrival in Evanston?" she asked. He had disappeared since coming to Evanston.
"Yes, I came in after a series of selections. I'm now the captain of the base."
Captain Baldwin turned sideways and let Bessy in, his tone very excited.
"After a few more months, Mr. Patrick told me that as long as I can climb to the position of a hall master of the Clark family, I'll be able to move freely."
Without any help, Captain Baldwin's promotion from a newcomer to the current captain in just 2 months had become a miracle for the entire Clark family. During this process, he had also gradually become stable and much like Patrick.
"The boss is inside,"
Captain Baldwin told Bessy and then nodded at Kara. Kara's head was in the clouds now. She couldn't understand the talk of the captain and the division chief, but she could tell that this person was Bessy's friend. They turned a corner. A person stood at the windowsill with his back to them, looking noble and indifferent. He turned around when he heard them come in, and the sunny windowsill behind him was reduced to the background, reflecting his picturesque brows and handsome eyes. He didn't look like an ordinary person at all. He was like the child of the rich and noble. Episode 271, Preferential Treatment. Kara used to think that there was probably no one more handsome than her idol husband, Zeke Miller. But now, no, Zeke was still the most handsome. She suddenly sobered up. While Kara gave herself reminders, Michael took out a bottle of medicine from one side of the table and threw it to Bessy.
"Conditions aren't good. We only have this for the time being,"
he said lazily. Bessy took it and asked Kara to take 2 pills. After watching Kara take the pills, Bessy sat on one side of the chair. She leaned back and raised an eyebrow at him. "Why are you so fast?" It took nearly 3 hours to drive here from Evanston, but less than an hour had passed. Michael looked down and arranged his clothes, righteously saying,
"I have official business here."
On the training field, Instructor Clark released them for lunch. He stood deep in thought in the middle of the training field. Instead of going to the cafeteria, he turned to the big building. 5 minutes later, he stood in front of a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was still holding his lunchbox and eating his meal. He glanced at him and informally said,
"Oh, Warren, sit down. I'll be going back to the Clark family's house in a few days. Are you here to adjust the information?"
"No." Instructor Clark shook his head. His face was cold and he appeared composed and calm.
"I found a very good seedling in the new class." "A new student from Northwestern University?"
The middle-aged man took a bite of his meal and raised a nonchalant eyebrow.
"How good?"
Having seen Captain Baldwin, a newcomer who was stronger than the Clark family, the middle-aged man felt like his mind had already been surprised enough. Instructor Clark glanced at him and calmly said,
"In today's shooting, she hit the bullseye 10 times in 5 seconds, and her arms are very stable."
Cough, cough, cough. The middle-aged man choked before swallowing. Instructor Clark handed him the tea from the side of the desk. The middle-aged man coughed for a minute.
"She hasn't undergone special training before?" "Of course not. She can't even stand properly in the military posture."
Instructor Clark naturally remembered the training of the first 5 days, along with Bessy's layman appearance. He sneered irritably.
"But she's difficult to deal with." "So what? Do we lack such people?"
The middle-aged man slammed his lunchbox down as his eyes lit up. At the same time, on the 3rd floor of Northwestern University's cafeteria, Dean Soup was talking to a friend when his cell phone suddenly rang. Without putting down his fork, Dean Soup picked up his phone and glanced at it. It was Roy Crisley, a freshman assistant teacher from the Science and Technology Department.
"Dean Soup!"
The voice on the phone shouted. His loud voice almost blew up the dean's ears. Dean Soup quickly winced and moved the phone away.
"What's the matter? Why are you panicking?"
Everyone at the dining table was familiar to him, so Dean Soup didn't avoid them hearing and spoke calmly. On the other end of the phone, Roy couldn't calm down and continued to yell,
"The Clark family has taken a fancy to our student Bessy this year."
Dean Soup's hand shook, and the ribs he had just picked up with the fork fell onto the table.
"What?"
He immediately stood up with a nervous expression.
"Give me the contact information. I'll solve this matter myself."
After hanging up, he began to hurry away, halfway through his meal. Dr. Weatherby glanced at him and asked as he left,
"Dean Soup, you're not eating anymore?" "How could I?"
Dean Soup turned and glanced at him.
"If I continue eating, this year's queen might never return from military training."
He said this and then vigorously rushed towards the stairs. He was rarely put on the spot. Instructor Clark was still with the middle-aged man, who had made 2 calls and then answered another call. His expression was a little strange after receiving the call. Instructor Clark waited for a while and then sat down on an empty chair in the office. He took off his hat and asked in a deep voice,
"What's wrong?"
The middle-aged man finally returned to his senses and glanced at him.
"What could happen? Do you know who she is?"
He continued eating with his fork.
"Who? She's really talented, but she's impatient."
Instructor Clark slightly narrowed his sharp eyes. Could it be Joshua who just called? Bessy was indeed a good seedling, otherwise Instructor Clark wouldn't have come here.
"She's the new queen of Northwestern University this year, the national final exam's top scorer. President Flores finally reeled her in after much difficulty."
The middle-aged man took a bite of rice and looked up.
"Do you think they would let her go? Don't dream about it. Just go back to the new students." "Top scorer?"
Instructor Clark was stunned. Students of Northwestern University were all impressive. After finding out about Bessy, he already guessed that she had good grades. But he didn't expect it to be of this level. With such achievements, it was only natural for Northwestern University to hold on to her dearly. Instructor Clark felt a little regretful inside, but he didn't obsess over it further. He just picked up his hat and was about to leave when he suddenly thought of something.
"Has Captain Baldwin brought new people to the base recently? I've met a bottleneck situation, and I want to ask him for advice."
He deeply admired this Captain Baldwin, who had recently gained a reputable name for himself in the Clark family. He had convinced the people here with his strength. The only drawback of Captain Baldwin's arrival was that his management ability was a little lacking. However, he was inherently intelligent. In the past 2 months, he climbed to the position of captain, which was evidence of his rapid progress. Many people wanted to ask him for advice, and Instructor Clark was no exception. It was just that Captain Baldwin was willing to take many missions, but seldom accepted a challenge. Instructor Clark had never found an opportunity and hadn't seen his face more than a few times.
No,
The middle-aged man shook his head.
I don't think he brought anyone new in. Forget about you. I can't even find anyone to recruit. Okay.
Instructor Clark nodded, feeling a little depressed. He immediately went downstairs. Captain Baldwin hadn't gone out today. Holding a lunchbox in his hand, he hurriedly walked towards the lounge.
Captain Baldwin, you don't have a mission today?
Instructor Clark was surprised to see Captain Baldwin the moment he got out of the office. After all, his whereabouts had always been uncertain, and sometimes it wasn't even easy for his boss to find him. Captain Baldwin had a good memory. Although he hadn't seen him many times, he still remembered him as a direct descendant of the Clark family. He was rather polite towards him.
I took a leave.
Captain Baldwin greeted him and then hurriedly left.
I still have matters to attend to.
Instructor Clark put his hat on his head and nodded without saying more. He had wanted to ask him for advice. The opponent's fighting style was very strange, but Captain Baldwin had always been the kind to be very busy, so Instructor Clark couldn't manage to find any opportunity to talk. Captain Baldwin quickly went to the lounge. Inside, Kara was still sleeping. Marvin hadn't come today. Captain Baldwin had already learned Marvin's role, and he had prepared the dishes and poured Bessy a cup of tea. She woke Kara and they seated themselves at the dining table. Kara sat next to Bessy eating with her fork. She didn't dare look at Michael in case she was brainwashed by him again. I'm almost done. I can go to train in the afternoon. Kara took a sip of soup. She thought about it before thanking both Bessy and Michael. While eating casually, Michael heard her voice and raised an eyebrow.
Are you sure?
He asked faintly. Inexplicably, there was a sense of pressure. Kara touched her cold back and forcibly said, Today's just shooting. I can endure it. Thank you.
Do you want to go back?
Michael didn't want to talk to Kara, so he simply turned to ask Bessy. While playing with her phone and eating, Bessy replied without looking up. She said she can go back. Daniel's medicine is really good. Michael had given Daniel's medicine to Kara today, which Bessy trusted undoubtedly. If Kara said she could train, she was definitely not just trying to be brave.
Oh.
Michael was low in spirits. In addition to eating time, they could rest for an hour at noon. It wasn't until 1:30 in the afternoon that Bessy took her hat and went to the field. Michael walked her to the entrance before leaving once she rejoined the team. Not far away, Instructor Clark and a few officers happened to come in. They passed by Michael on the way.
Michael.
The group of people greeted him and stood upright. Michael appeared to be doing nothing in Evanston, but over here, he was deeply respected from the heart. As for why, those who had trained with him didn't want to dig up the memories. Michael took out a cigarette from his pocket. The faint smoke rose from the tip, and he glanced past Instructor Clark.
Keep it up,
he said lightly. The group of people only dared to leave once Michael walked away. They heaved sighs of relief.
I don't know why Michael suddenly came here. When he asked to be the chief instructor last time, he ran off to become a doctor.
An instructor unscrewed the bottle cap in his hand. Instructor Clark walked forward and concisely said,
To see someone.
See someone? The other instructor was a little curious, but still didn't dare to ask. They weren't new students anymore. Every year, the instructors of Northwestern University and the University of Chicago had a designated allocation. Strangely, Northwestern University had specifically designated Instructor Clark's team this year. To be frank, Instructor Clark's strength was enough to be used as an instructor for special training. As for training new students, it was like torture to him. The people on the base all hoped to cooperate with Captain Baldwin's team and learn his tricks. Recently, Instructor Clark's team had done well on a task and finally had the opportunity to learn from Captain Baldwin. Who knew that instead, they would be brought to train these students all of a sudden? Episode 272, Bessy's Display of Power. All the planned tasks and cooperations had gone down the drain because of this. His subordinates all knew how depressed he was. In fact, they were also extremely depressed. After all, this opportunity wouldn't present itself in the future. This person suddenly remembered that something had been discussed among the instructors at noon.
By the way, Instructor Clark, do you have a particularly impressive girl in your platoon who shot 10 bullseyes in 10 seconds? Is it true? That's not true.
Instructor Clark glanced at him. The man nodded.
I knew it couldn't be. She shot 10 bullseyes in 5 seconds.
Instructor Clark finished and walked directly back to the class. Those left standing in place were speechless. The first day was special training for shooting. The second day was obstacle rock climbing. The third day was bringing loads up the mountain. On the fourth and fifth day, they learned the boxing technique that the Clark family generally didn't pass on to the outside world. The special training for boxing only had 9 short styles. Teaching new students this was partly to help them defend and protect themselves when they encountered danger. This group of students was admitted to Northwestern University because they were intelligent, but they were all still students after all and had no foundation. They looked impressive, but lacked real worth. They were soft like tofu and didn't have much strength. Only Bessy's punches were worthy. Instructor Clark swept his eyes around the field. These past 2 days he had focused his attention on Bessy. He asked her to come up and demonstrate to the group of students. At the entrance, Michael came over with the administrator.
Michael, these are the students of Northwestern University this year.
The middle-aged man followed 2 steps behind Michael and introduced the place in a very respectful tone.
Over here.
Michael was still wearing casual clothes. His eyes swept past the training ground. Bessy's class was on the edge of the training ground and was easy to find. He walked towards them. The middle-aged man wanted to introduce the place to him and was taken aback to see that he had found another purpose. Then it became clear to him that Michael indeed had private motives. No wonder he had suddenly appeared here. Whenever Michael and the middle-aged man passed by, the instructors' voices became louder. The other students couldn't help but glance over. They could tell that these 2 people weren't ordinary.
Fall in.
Instructor Clark asked Bessy to return to the team for now. He turned and saluted Michael as well as the middle-aged man. Glancing at him, Michael lazily folded his arms and casually asked,
How's the special training?
Instructor Clark said it was going fine.
Okay.
Michael slightly nodded and pointed at Bessy.
You, come out.
She stepped out of the formation.
The most important thing about boxing is actual combat.
Michael glanced at her with clear eyes, seemingly smiling.
Instructor Clark, come and fight her. Let these students experience the power of the special boxing's fist.
Stunned, Instructor Clark stood straight as an arrow.
The other students in the class are also doing well. Gary is not bad and he has practiced before too.
He suggested. Fighting with a girl, especially Bessy, he was afraid he would go overboard and strike too hard. What if he injured the new queen of Northwestern University? Besides, Michael, Joshua, and his own parents would never let him go. Michael ignored him and glanced at Bessy. Under the sunlight, she heard his words despite being distracted and instantly perked up. Fight? Copy. Can I use my full strength? She looked up at Michael. Michael raised an eyebrow and very indulgently said,
Of course.
These days, Bessy was a little lazy no matter what she did. However, since she was indeed very talented, Instructor Clark had been helpless in the end and had even succumbed to his fate. While climbing the mountain with heavy loads yesterday, she had held 2 people's weights by herself. By the time the others reached the mountaintop, she was already sleeping under a tree. Instructor Clark felt like her physical endurance was terribly good. Now, he glanced at her and was taken aback. He felt like his eyes must be dazzled. Otherwise, why did he see Bessy's eyes shining faintly? There were so many boys in the class. Any one of them would be good to fight. Why did it have to be her? He felt very distressed inside.
Bessy, you can strike first. I'll be on the defense.
He took a step back and cupped his fists politely. Instead of taking off her hat, Bessy squeezed her wrists and glanced at him. Are you very impressive in this place? With a cold expression, he replied,
I'm okay.
He seemed humble. Bessy nodded and gauged his strength. The class was already sitting on the ground, watching the scene excitedly. The group of boys weren't afraid of blowing the matter up and shouted,
Bessy, you can do it! Knock the instructor down! Knock the instructor down!
The other training classes not far away heard their shouting and looked over. Were this class's students crazy? Did they think their instructor was made of paper? Especially since their opponent was the captain, Instructor Clark. In the past 2 days, Bessy's reputation for being swift and fierce had circulated among the instructors. Several of them had wanted to compete directly with her, but Instructor Clark had rejected them. Now that Bessy was going to fight against him, the surrounding instructors stopped training and brought their own students to watch the excitement.
Gather, turn left, walk in unison. Stop, sit in place.
The students from the chemistry department next door sat on the east side and watched under their instructor's leadership. The students from the mathematics department sat on the west side, and the students from the art department next door sat on the south side. Bessy's class sat on the north side. It was a bunch of people surrounding her at once. Glancing at the onlookers, Instructor Clark decided not to be strict on them. Since training was coming to an end, he allowed them to watch. Several instructors didn't dare go by Michael and the middle-aged man and only gathered at the side. The middle-aged man stood beside Michael, standing with one hand cupped over the other. When he saw Bessy's fist gesture, he was slightly taken aback.
Michael, this classmate has learned so fast. She looks exemplary.
Bessy threw a left uppercut. Instructor Clark was pretty sure that she had never systematically trained before, so he didn't really take this match seriously at first. But when she moved, he could almost hear the swing of her fist blowing in his ear. His expression instantly changed and he immediately stepped back. After years of training, he instinctively felt his adrenaline pumping, which made him quickly strike and ignore his words of staying on the defense. He had to at least protect himself. He even remembered to demonstrate to the students, and used the 8th trick to block her. Boom! The impact was simply too powerful. Even if he did the perfect defense stance, he still couldn't prevent Bessy's right fist from hitting him. His wrist and abdomen were severely impacted, and he unexpectedly fell to the ground. A huge cloud of dust rose with his fall. Bessy was only trying out new boxing techniques. The moves she had learnt before were all deadly ultimate moves that she had developed herself. The attacking and defense moves that they had learned this week were a first to her, so she didn't use much strength. Instructor Clark flipped himself up and rubbed his wrist. Bessy's second offense move came immediately after. He had managed to defend himself the first time, but the successive attacks rendered him defenseless. The third move, the fourth move, the fifth move. Throughout the whole process, Instructor Clark didn't have the slightest chance to fight back. The students and instructors originally applauded and cheered, but after a while, no one dared to say anything, and they all stared dumbfounded at the confrontation. Even the middle-aged man, who was a little worried at first, was now flabbergasted. Without needing confirmation from Instructor Clark, he knew that Bessy was the seedling they had talked about the other day. He already regretted coming here with Michael today. To see such a good seedling without being able to obtain her was undoubtedly a huge blow to him. Bessy finally withdrew her hands. She reached out to lift her hat and calmly said, "The special training's boxing is really powerful." After a long while, the chemistry department's instructor stuttered.
"Oh, it's this powerful?"
The mathematics department instructor glanced at him.
"You've learned it as well. Don't you know how powerful it is?"
The chemistry department's instructor immediately stopped talking. He was flabbergasted precisely because he had learned it. Having stayed at the base these 2 days, these students also knew that their instructors had been specially trained and weren't ordinary people. Furthermore, Instructor Clark was the leader, but he had been defeated like this. After that day, the words Bessy Miller quickly spread among the new students. The last day of new student training ended. Because of Instructor Clark's severe injuries, Michael took over the last day's training session. 10 days of training had gone by in the blink of an eye. In the past 10 days, the group of students remembered nothing else other than the 2 words, Bessy Miller. Rumors of her quickly spread at Northwestern University. Within a few days, the matter blew up. After a day off, they formally started class. Textbooks were distributed the night before the first class. The boys in the computer science class wanted to send the books. Their class is only 3 female students, but the boys couldn't enter the girls' dormitory. While Bessy was bathing, Kara went down to bring both of their books up. She put Bessy's book away and turned on the computer. "Have any of you heard of Northwestern University's laboratory?" Alyssa pushed her glasses up the bridge of her nose and ignorantly asked. "Laboratory?" Denora had never gone to military training. These few days, she had been helping out the student union's seniors. When she heard this, she lightly said, "It's a place everyone from the 4 big departments wants to enter." Bessy came out of the shower wearing a long t-shirt. After 10 days of military training, she was much more familiar with Kara. Pulling out a chair and propping her legs up, she saw the neatly organized books on the table and calmly said, "Thanks." The phone in her hand rang twice. Looking down, she saw only one word on the caller ID. Episode 273, A Diamond in the Rough. Luke. She took her earphones and walked towards the balcony.
"Your training is over?"
The voice on the other end of the phone was youthful and elegant. It was Luke, who hadn't contacted her all this time. Without drying her hair, Bessy leaned on the balcony, staring at the students walking by downstairs. "I just came back this afternoon." He laughed and then took his phone somewhere quiet.
"I waited for your military training to end before looking for you. I heard from Dean Soup that you applied for both the computer science and nuclear engineering majors. How arrogant."
So. Bessy put her hands on the balcony, sounding quite modest.
"You have full lessons tomorrow?"
After only one glance at her timetable, she had basically memorized it. She thought for a while and replied, "I'm free on my last period in the afternoon."
"Call me then. I already talked to Scarlett. She'll be free tomorrow afternoon."
Luke was very busy. After making an appointment with her, he hurriedly hung up. Bessy's phone call this time didn't last over 2 minutes. Kara put her chin on her hand and asked, "Your classmate?" "A friend." She threw her phone on the table with a thud. Kara didn't gossip further and changed the subject. "By the way, Bessy, have you heard of Northwestern University's laboratory?" "I'm not sure. You want in?" Bessy had only checked several research institutes in Evanston. Northwestern University's laboratory. Luke was there. "Don't worry, it's not difficult," she calmly replied. He hadn't told her it wasn't difficult. She didn't need to know more. So she hadn't studied in it in particular either. Before entering the institute, the laboratory was the first hurdle. About to climb out of bed with her cell phone, Denora heard Bessy's words and sneered involuntarily. She stared at her indecipherably. "Not difficult? Do you know what the laboratory is?" There were 4 laboratories between Northwestern University and the University of Chicago, and getting into one of them was the only path to the research institute. But entering the laboratories required going through several interviews and selection processes. They basically required that students had reached graduate school, and usually only those led by doctoral professors could enter. As for sophomores, some of them didn't even know what the laboratory was. The laboratory's development had already been completed, and each school only selected a few people every year. The specific number depended on the quality of the students. News in Evanston was blocked from the outside world, especially the existence of the research institute. No trace could be found on the internet, and only the 4 big families knew the details. Naturally, Denora and Sherry were knowledgeable about it. They also knew how difficult it was to enter the laboratories. There were several selection processes and countless restrictions. Even the 4 major families had to rely on their own strength to enter the research institute. Denora found it indecipherable after hearing Bessy describe it as not difficult. She glanced at her, certain that she had nothing to do with the Miller family. Even if the Miller family had fallen and had no control over the research institute anymore, it wasn't to the point where the youngest generation would be so ignorant. After all, the Miller family had been planning to regain control over the years. Denora felt relieved again at this thought. But the last mercenary who spoke to Bessy in this tone might still be barbecuing. Without turning on her computer, Bessy just leaned back in her chair and smiled at Denora. "Yeah, I don't know. Tell us what you know." Sensing the tension in the air, Kara immediately stood up and played dumb. "Denora, aren't you going to sleep? Go to bed quickly. Bessy, let's play a game together. Have you downloaded the poker tournament yet?" Denora was actually very good at roping in the will of people. On the first day she arrived at the dormitory, she had given Kara and Alyssa a bunch of gifts, such as facial masks, sunscreen, and snacks or soda that she had brought back from dinner with her seniors. They were both on good terms with her. But Kara really couldn't understand why Denora behaved like a different person towards Bessy. At this thought, she turned to look at Bessy. She was looking through the new textbook with her legs propped up casually. The incandescent lamp in the bedroom shone against her side profile, casting shadows under her long and dense eyelashes. She believed that Bessy would definitely make it big if she entered the entertainment industry. just like her idol husband, Zeke, and both their last names were Miller. She sat back down and glanced at Denora, who had already climbed onto her bed. Denora was actually not bad either. She was one of the most popular girls on campus. When she came to the dormitory on the first day, Kara had already arrived and naturally remembered that there were 3 or 4 seniors following behind Denora. Her reputation had even spread to the computer science department. That was until Bessy's arrival. Kara fell deep in thought. The computer science department's first class, mathematics, was at 7:20 a.m. the next day. After washing up and putting on light makeup, Kara saw Bessy coming out of the bathroom and quickly handed the book to her. "Hurry up, we're going to be late." Alyssa was already waiting for them with her book. Higher mathematics was a specialized class. Computer science and software engineer students were taught together, so Alyssa naturally went with them. "Which classroom is it?" Bessy casually took a pen and followed them out. "South A's building 304? Kara wasn't very sure. Flipping over the first page, she checked the time and classroom of the lesson. "That's right, South A's building 304. Bessy hadn't brought her book. Looking down, she casually rolled up her sleeves and narrowed her beautiful eyes. "Then we might be on a different path." Kara and Alyssa were both dumbfounded. "I'm going to the Academic Affairs building first." These buildings were on different roads. Bessy put her hands in her pockets, seemingly in a good mood. "I probably won't be attending the computer science department's classes." She smiled casually. She had told Dean Soup that she would only take the computer science department's midterm and final exams, and only take the classes on the nuclear engineering side. Staring at her, Kara and Alyssa exchanged glances while on their small bicycles. The meaning in their eyes was very obvious. She dared to skip the first class? The class bell had yet to ring when they arrived in the classroom. Sitting in the last row, Kai saw Kara coming in from the back door and immediately waved to her. "Over here!" News of an arrogant beauty majoring in computer science who had even beaten Instructor Clark had already spread in the boys' dormitory and software engineering class. They all turned around after hearing this, but they only saw Alyssa and Kara. "Huh?" Taken aback, Kai made way for Kara. "Where's Bessy?" Kara vaguely replied. "She took leave." She didn't dare to say that her roommate had been arrogant enough to skip class. At the same time, Dean Soup was already in his office. "Dean Soup, why are you here so early?" The teaching assistant tidying the office glanced at him very surprised. Dean Soup managed everything on a daily basis and didn't teach any lessons. He occasionally brought a few graduate students to do their papers, but usually he couldn't be reached in the office. He mostly spent his time in the science and technology department. So why was he here so early? Sitting at his desk, Dean Soup raised his wrist to look at the time. It was 7:40 a.m. "I came to do something," he replied. Puzzled, the teaching assistant put aside the things at hand and poured him a cup of tea. Within a few minutes, there was a knock on the door. The busy teaching assistant clearly saw Dean Soup's eyes light up and his back straighten. Who was it? Before he could think any further, a girl in a white shirt came in. Dean Soup stood up with his hands on the table and pushed a textbook he had prepared across the table to her. "This is the textbook. I've already informed the instructor. Do you have the curriculum schedule for the nuclear engineering department?" He glanced at the teaching assistant as he spoke. "Print her a curriculum schedule for nuclear engineering." Although nuclear engineering was Bessy's second major, the school hadn't recorded it yet, and she only had one major in the educational administration system. Thus, she didn't have the curriculum schedule. The teaching assistant quickly stopped staring and turned on the computer to check the curriculum schedule. "No worries, I have the class schedule," said Bessy as she took out a pile of books. Holding the warm teacup, Dean Soup didn't drink it and just looked up. "How did you get it?" he asked. Bessy just silently glanced at him. After remembering how she had hacked into the educational administration system half a month ago, Dean Soup put down his teacup and said, "Miss Miller, please carefully consider your actions next time. The engineering department has it hard, too." Bessy nodded and realized that this was a school after all. "I'm sorry, it won't happen again," she said rather apologetically. It's okay. Accustomed to it, Dean Soup just waved it off good-naturedly. He thought of something and asked, "Since you're taking 2 majors, do you want to enter the laboratory in the future?" Bessy had yet to investigate Northwestern University's laboratory. Hearing this, she looked up. "What are the requirements for entering?"
There is an assessment. Generally, 10 outstanding people are selected among the seniors. The final decision will be made by the doctors in the laboratory.
This matter was also very important to Dean Soup. After all, the laboratory was related to the research institute.
But there are exceptions.
Bessy opened the textbook with her other hand and motioned for him to continue. Dean Soup said with a smile,
Those who finish learning the basics ahead of time and achieve excellent grades can enter the laboratory in advance. Last year's final exam's top scorer, Luke, is also from Chicago. He entered our Science and Technology Department's laboratory at the beginning of the semester.
The students who could pass this kind of difficult assessment were considered natural geniuses. They held complete advantage over the seniors. Even now, people were still praying to Luke during their major exams, hoping for some of his genius. Episode 274. Special Training. Speaking of this, Dean Soup lowered his voice.
Bessy, if you focus on your computer science, I guarantee that you'll enter the laboratory 3 or 4 times faster than him. The doctors like people like you.
She calculated things in her brain faster than the calculator and could go up against Luke. When Luke first entered the laboratory, several doctors had almost fought for him. But Dean Soup had come forward to settle the matter. Bessy nodded and finally understood what Luke had meant by easy. She ignored Dean Soup's request for her to focus on computer science and politely bade him farewell. After she left, the teaching assistant put down the files she had compiled and pondered. This year's final exam's top scorer wants to study 2 majors in her first year?
She chose computer science but is majoring in nuclear engineering.
Dean Soup lowered his head and blew on the tea.
We're all waiting for her to enter the laboratory. She'll probably enter no later than Luke did.
The teaching assistant gasped with widened eyes. This person was even more impressive than the sophomore Luke? Taking 2 majors and even entering the laboratory in her first year? Was this year's new students teaching the seniors how to be better? Michael raised his slightly lowered phone and said,
We'll arrive soon. I'm hanging up first.
Then he quickly hung up. Walking seemed like a faster option than driving at this point, and the road to Northwestern University was a lot more crowded and packed due to the upcoming holidays. This was also the same road that led to a smaller pedestrian street filled with eateries, which was also packed with a large and chaotic crowd. Michael stood out in the messy crowd due to his tall figure and his chic yet posh aura and stature, while Bessy followed quietly behind him. Due to the large crowd, people would cut across in front of them almost every 2 steps they took, disrupting their line of vision. The yells of the shop owners, loud blasting music, and countless chatter around filled Bessy's ears, her eyebrows unconsciously knitted. The hustle and bustle was coupled with the smell of body sweat and oil from the eateries around them. When yet another burly and stout-looking man bumped into her, Michael stopped in his tracks a few steps ahead of her. He expressionlessly looked at the burly guy, then extended his hand towards Bessy. He held onto her hand and said with a neutral yet gentle voice,
Follow me closely.
Michael's body temperature was always slightly on the colder side, and his hand holding her was no exception. As Bessy followed him through the street of eateries, the crowd started to thin after a while.
A few of my friends will be there together, so it's good that you happen to be on holiday too.
His footsteps slowed down, but his voice remained steady.
You may remember one of them. His name is Sebastian.
Bessy nodded and went silent after simply saying, All right. The restaurant had been chosen by Samuel and was situated at a hotel near Northwestern University in order to accommodate Bessy. After exiting Northwestern University and crossing the street of eateries, it was just a 5-minute walk from there onwards. Sebastian and the others were all sitting inside the private suite. There weren't more than 6 people in the gathering, including Samuel and Robert, and all of them had met Bessy previously at the Heaven Lounge. Even though this bunch was known to be party animals, none of them had brought their flings around with them, so it was pretty quiet in the suite. The food was already served on the table by the time Bessy and Michael arrived, and everyone was caught up in their own conversations with one another. Although some of them had cigarettes, none of them were lit up as they clearly were instructed by Samuel beforehand.
Please have a seat, Miss Miller.
Robert, sitting calmly in his spot, immediately jumped up and pulled out a chair for Bessy once he saw her walk into the room. He even set a pair of silverware for her on the table. As if that wasn't enough, he took Bessy's backpack from her hands and placed it on the other side of the sofa for her. Apart from Samuel and Michael, who were long used to Robert's boot-licking antics, everyone else was clearly taken aback by what they were seeing. They all just stared blankly at him, including Sebastian. Everyone grew more and more curious about Bessy's identity. In the entirety of Evanston, apart from Michael and Rosemary, who were at the top level of the social class, almost no one could make Robert treat them with such a servile attitude. Although the Soup family was affiliated to the Clark family, Robert didn't act this way normally. He wouldn't butter someone up just because that person was related to Michael, or rather, he didn't need to do so. Even if it was Sherry, Robert would probably just be slightly more polite when speaking to her.
Miss Miller, are you settling down well enough in school? There's an unspoken tradition in Northwestern University where everyone has to live in the campus residences, but you can always get Michael to settle that part for you.
Sebastian was reminded that he was the one who hosted this gathering, and he immediately called the waiter over to order a glass of juice for her.
Oh right, have you joined the student union yet? Your school's outreach department has approached me previously for sponsorship purposes, so if you're keen, you can always come to find me.
Even though the Palmer family wasn't considered one of the most affluent families in Evanston, due to Sebastian's highly sociable and likable personality, he possessed a considerable number of connections. On top of that, he was also considered to be a part of the reputable social circle of the Clark family. His status and influence were a force to be reckoned with. Bessy, who was finally seated and already engaged with her phone, looked up when she heard his offer and rejected him politely.
No, thank you. It's all right.
As she frequented the school library so often for class, President Soup had also sent her all the texts and materials required for the second and third years of university. Other than attending classes, she would either be having official consultation sessions with the lecturers of her nuclear engineering courses, or occasionally finding Luke for help. The student union had also approached her repeatedly, with one of their seniors finding her at her lodging on 2 occasions and calling her on the phone multiple times. Sebastian glanced at her and nodded, not probing on this matter any further.
Michael, why is Miss Miller still residing in school?
Samuel tilted his head to look towards Michael as he asked, with a fork in hand and legs crossed. He recalled that Michael had an apartment near the school when he was in university. Michael was seated beside Samuel with his hands resting on the table. He spoke without any visible change in his expression.
Just eat your food.
His tone was slightly grumpy. Samuel smiled, immediately understanding what he meant. Judging from the situation, it could only mean that Bessy herself refused him. Michael was known to be hard to handle. Even Joshua couldn't handle him. But now, Samuel concluded as Rosemary had before him. Michael had finally met his match. His smile widened as his legs remained crossed. They started to discuss business matters as they dug into the food, mainly touching on the recent issues regarding the World Poker Tour.
I saw a bulletin board yesterday,
Sebastian said, mindlessly swirling the wine in his glass and leaning against the chair after finishing his meal.
They're going to announce the new companies after mid-autumn. It should be just a few smaller IT companies, but I heard all of them are quite strong and capable companies, and we're just there to make up the numbers. Now that our girl boss is present, what do you think about it?
The girl boss Sebastian was referring to was Rosemary, Evanston's well-known career woman. Everyone in the circle who knew her would all address her as Miss Clark when they saw her. That was one way you could tell Sherry was far from being at Rosemary's current status. They weren't on the same level after all. Putting down his fork, Michael tilted his head and looked at Bessy as he slowly chewed on a piece of rib. He grabbed a glass beside him, poured a new glass of tea and placed it beside her. He then mindlessly answered,
I'm not sure, but she recently borrowed an amount of working capital.
Every single person at this gathering had a reputable status in Evanston. The scene happening before their eyes made them even more restless. No wonder Sebastian had instructed everyone to not publicize today's gathering to anyone outside of their circle. Taking this current situation, for example, nobody would believe it unless they heard about it themselves. Holding her glass with one hand, Bessy texted Tucker with the other. Tucker was on holiday starting this afternoon and had texted her earlier.
Hey sis, could we have dinner together tomorrow night?
Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Tucker had toyed with this idea for a long time in his mind. Bessy furrowed her eyebrows when she saw the message. Shouldn't Tucker and James be back at the Miller family's house by now? Why was he asking her to go to dinner tomorrow night? She sent a question mark over and Tucker replied,
Old Mr. Miller said that it wasn't the right time yet.
The old Mr. Miller that Tucker was referring to was the same person as the Uncle Jack that James mentioned previously. After hearing his short explanation, Bessy more or less understood the situation. She replied, "All right." The gathering didn't drag on for too long. Bessy left with Michael right after she finished texting with Tucker, as she had to get back to continue studying some of her research files. Robert and Samuel followed them, naturally. After Sebastian and the others walked them out, they returned to the suite to continue their drinking session. As if he just recalled something important, Sebastian immediately whipped out his phone and gave a call to the outreach department of Northwestern University.
"Minister Deem,"
Sebastian said. He sat on a stool and lit up a cigarette.
"There's something I need your help with."
Minister Deem from the outreach department was a business lady with a cold and precise personality.
Go ahead, Director Palmer.
Episode 275. The End of His Tyranny. Make a Name for Yourself. Sebastian briefly explained his request for them to accept someone into the union. He was known to always have a long-term vision for things, and he had also given Minister Deem many sponsorship opportunities on many occasions. The students of Northwestern University were always more than keen to be of any help to Sebastian, and would welcome his requests with open arms. Immediately understanding his intention, Minister Deem placed him on speaker mode as she opened her documents to key in the new name and contact number. "Sure, just give me her name and number. I'll personally contact her for you." Sebastian started reciting the number for her.
166.
She didn't find anything out of the ordinary in the first 3 numbers, but the remaining 8 numbers slowly started to ring a bell in her mind as she typed them in. She stared at the name that popped up along with the number that she had just put in and went silent for a second. Getting impatient, Sebastian hurriedly asked,
"Have you saved the number, Minister Deem?"
Bessy held a white computer in her hand. It was thin, light, and extremely beautiful. The shape of a poppy flower was printed obviously on the computer cover. So far, the World Poker Tour had only released this to a small group of people. Since it wasn't yet released to the general public, not many people knew the logo. Neither Alyssa nor Kara mixed in the IT circles and naturally didn't recognize the World Poker Tour's poppy trademark. They could only praise its appearance. It indeed looked good. Even Alyssa, who wasn't very girly, felt excited by it. Unlike them, Denora was very interested in the World Poker Tour and recognized this logo. Her nonchalant expression finally changed. Since when did the World Poker Tour release computers? It was fake, right? Casually opening the computer, Bessy automatically turned it on. The blue screen displayed as usual, and then a machine voice sounded. "Please perform pupil authentication." After authentication, it automatically powered on in less than 2 seconds. It was incredibly smooth, and its performance speed was evident. When the pupil authentication was performed, Denora stared at the computer in a daze. The pupil authentication artificial intelligence system was the World Poker Tour's unique technology. Denora sat back down, rather agitated. "It's so high-tech." Kara dragged her chair over to Bessy's side, looking very excited. "Where did you buy it? Is there a link? I want to buy one too." "You want it?" Bessy casually put the computer on the table. She bit her straw and said, "There's no link, but I can help you contact the person if you want it." "How much is it?" Coming from an ordinary family, after she got into Northwestern University, she received bonuses from the school and her city. On top of that, her parents and relatives had also given her a lot of money. She had always planned to find a part-time job for herself after coming to college. Between that and everything she'd been given, she wasn't short of money. Bessy thought for a while and replied with a number. $1,500. Kara's eyes widened. $1,500? The computer she used that required 30 seconds to turn on cost $3,500. But a high-tech computer like Bessy's only cost $1,500? Bessy was stunned for a moment before choosing another number. $1,000 is fine too. Kara was speechless. $1,000 was close to the price of a normal cell phone. Alyssa pushed her glasses. "Bessy, did you miss a zero? Is this computer $10,000? No. Withdrawing her gaze, Bessy understood why Kara was so shocked. "It's $1,000 discounted based on our friendship. Transfer the money to me and I'll get my friend to ship it to you," she calmly said. Alyssa also wanted to buy it at this cheap price. Bessy opened her Twitter. She saw Rosemary's message at a glance. Bessy, have you received the computer? Happy face. Bessy replied to her, then opened the notification she'd just received that Kara had sent the money. Soon after, Alyssa also sent the money. After receiving both, she clicked on a profile labeled Neighbor and transferred the same amounts to that person. Transfer of $1,000. Transfer of $1,000. 2 minutes later, she was notified again. The transfer has been received. The transfer has been received. Then, the neighbor sent a message with just a question mark on it. Bessy replied, "It's money for my 2 friends' computers." She then gave Mr. Cheatham the 2's contact information and closed the chat. In the afternoon, Bessy still didn't attend lessons with Kara and the others. Rumors of her second major in the Science and Technology department gradually spread. She only had 2 short classes in the afternoon, while Kara and Alyssa had a full schedule of classes. After her lessons, Bessy prepared to go out and see Luke. At that time, in the Northwestern University Science and Technology Department's laboratory, Luke was doing an optical experiment. Outside the laboratory, a tall man came to him with an experiment record.
"Luke, Dean Soup wanted you to give a speech to the freshmen."
A speech? Luke stopped the experiment at hand and glanced at the experimental record in Jerome's hand.
"Okay, I got it."
Jerome Childs was a senior who had just entered the laboratory. Luke had entered the laboratory at the beginning of the year and was also a student personally accepted by the Research Institute's vice president. The whole laboratory knew this fact. However, Jerome had been the president of the student union previously and had helped Luke a lot along the way. Because of this, he was able to come to the laboratory mainly because of Luke. Luke was a research madman. Everyone knew his name in the Science and Technology department. But because he was rather reclusive, he had few friends. Jerome was one of the few.
"We might have one more newcomer in our laboratory this year."
Jerome had more information in his hands than Luke.
"This year's queen, she's impressive even in comparison to your glory last year."
Still waiting for the results of the experiment, Luke glanced at the time on his watch.
"Help me look after this experiment. Do you have something else to do?"
Jerome handed the experimental record to another student. These had to be given to the professor later. Then he turned back and glanced strangely at him. When Luke had first enrolled last year, he had been clung onto by a group of seniors. He had outstanding grades, an IQ higher than all the other new students, and a remarkable appearance that was top 10 on the school heartthrob list. At least half of the seniors had romantic thoughts about him. He was Northwestern University's veritable school hunk. However, after observing him for so long, Jerome and Luke's roommate had both realized that his only romance was with the experiments he did. Dean Soup had even prepared an unprecedented lounge for him in the laboratory.
"I'm off to see my friend,"
Luke said calmly as he placed the utensils neatly on the table and took off his lab coat. Since Jerome had entered the laboratory as Luke's subordinate, he basically had nothing to do if Luke went out.
"The 2 friends you keep talking about? Who are they? The one who loves photography or the particularly difficult one? Can I go and meet them?"
"Both of them." Luke buttoned his shirt up to his neckline. Although he was rather young, there was still a somewhat overbearing aura in his eyes. Having known him for so long, Jerome already realized that the usually cold and emotionless person only appeared slightly more human at the mention of his 2 younger friends.
"They came to Evanston to see you? Can I come along?"
Jerome had been curious about them for a long time. Unfortunately, Luke was like a protective demon. He had never shown Jerome a photo or even revealed the girls' names. Luke assumed whoever asked had plans of hitting on them, so no one was allowed to ask. Jerome shamelessly followed Luke to a cafe by the school gate. It was still lesson time, so there weren't many people around during the last 2 periods. The cafeteria was half filled. Luke glanced at it and decided on a quiet spot. Sitting next to him, Jerome waited for 2 minutes, during which he would stare intensely at every girl who passed by the cafe and then ask Luke if they were his friends. Luke ordered 2 cups of coffee with clear eyes.
"No, you didn't even look. How do you know?"
Jerome casually ordered a cup of coffee, still staring at the door. After a while, a figure appeared. She was wearing long pants and holding a pile of books in her hands. Her exposed skin was very fair, and she wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses. Her facial features were very delicate, and her temperament seemed calm and slightly gloomy. She and Luke seemed to have a similar style. Jerome quickly gasped.
"Luke, is that your friend? She's also from our school?" She's so good-looking, and she'd look even better if she didn't wear glasses.
While they talked, Scarlett also saw them and walked directly over to them. Putting the books on the table, a small smile appeared on her face and she said softly, "Luke."
"Are you used to the dorm? I have a house nearby."
Luke glanced at her and gave her a set of spare keys.
"You can move in with Bessy. I'll talk to the school."
Scarlett took the key and thought about it. Okay. Jerome quickly introduced himself to her. He thought to himself, no wonder Luke didn't show a picture of his friends to anyone. Even if she isn't in the top 10 popular girls list, she would still be considered beautiful.
"By the way, where's your other friend?"
Jerome glanced outside.
"I don't see her."
Luke calmly checked the time. It was 4:28 p.m.
2 minutes left.
2 minutes? Jerome raised an eyebrow.
Such a fixed timing?
2 minutes later, a pair of slender hands pushed open the cafe's glass door. Looking up, Jerome saw a tall and thin girl. She pushed open the door with one hand and put the other in her pocket. She didn't bring any books or pens and wore a baseball cap on her head, with its brim lowered. Her head was also lowered and her face couldn't be seen clearly.
"Is that your friend?"
He glanced at Luke and pointed at the door.